Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Township of Georgian Bay Committee of the Whole meeting for Wednesday, October 13th, 2021. It's 1 p.m. and I'd like to call this meeting to order. In the spirit of reconciliation, we wish to acknowledge the enduring relationship between Indigenous people and the territories they traditionally occupied. We recognize and deeply appreciate the historic connection they have to this place. The land, the water, the sky, and all that live on it, in it, and above it, under it. We are grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we want to thank all the generations of Indigenous peoples who have taken care of this place and who continue to take care of it. And we want to show our respect. Hundreds of years after the first treaties were signed, they remain relevant today. May they guide our decisions and actions. We commit to learn, to educate, to honor sacred places, and to take actions towards real truth and reconciliation. Council, I need to ask if any of you have any pecuniary interests or code of conduct, I did it again, code of conduct conflicts, I'm gonna have to practice that, to declare. Okay, seeing none, the first item on our list is a delegation from Heather Sargent, Georgian Bay Forever. Ms. Way, if you get her joining the meeting, it would be great.
Actually, Karen, the person that's going to be giving the delegation is Nicole Carpenter.
Yep, she's in the meeting as well.
So if you could switch her, that'd be great.
She is.
Okay, Ms. Carpenter, the screen is yours.
Okay, and do I have the ability to share my screen?
Yes, you do.
Okay, great, thank you. Give me one moment. Okay, can everybody see my screen okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. If there's any connection issues, please let me know and I can get Heather to take over the presentation for me. I tend to sometimes have a bit of delays when I share my screen. So hello, everybody, and good afternoon. My name is Nicole Carpenter, and I'm a project coordinator with Georgian Bay Forever, and I'm here with Heather Sargent, who is our communications director. Georgian Bay Forever is a registered charity dedicated to the scientific research and public education, with the main focus on protecting the waters of Georgian Bay. I'd like to thank the township for previous years of support towards our hiring some students that have allowed us to do invasive Phragmites removal along the coasts of Georgian Bay Township in Georgian Bay. And invasive Phragmites, if you don't know already, is a perennial reed, meaning it grows back every year, and it has a negative impact on the biodiversity of these wetland ecosystems. And it can take up to 7 years to remove with repeated cutting efforts. In 2020, Georgian Bay Forever mapped out approximately 430 invasive Phragmites stands. Each point on this map represents a different stand, with the green color representing sites that are eradicated or on their way towards eradication. And what this means is in 2020, we would not have seen any regrowth from these sites. The yellow represents sites that were cut in 2020, and red represents sites that were untreated. And just for reference, north is at the top of this map. You can see Beausoleil Island in the middle here, and down at the bottom, the more southern region is Port Severn and Severn Sound. This year in 2021, what you can see here is we have an addition of almost 100 new sites, which are represented by the white color, but there's an increase in the green and yellow, which mean eradication and cut our control oversights in the northern and mid regions, from starting down south here in Macy's Bay going upwards or northwards. This is accomplished through our hiring of 2 students this year that conduct mapping and cutting activities throughout the summer. We use what is called the cut to drown method, and this is cutting the plant in the water as close to the ground as possible, leaving a hollow root system that gets soaked with water and it drowns it out. So the students do this for the entire summer, as well as attending community events in Georgian Bay Township, including the Brissette House Market. And this is to spread education and awareness to the public, as well as hosting community cuts around the township coastlines. And this to recruit community involvement and get volunteers. So here's a table, and there's a lot of numbers here, but what we've done is broken it down by region within Georgian Bay Township. And as you can see in this first column here, our total sites. This year, we had a total of 530 sites across the township coastlines of Georgian Bay. As we move along the columns here, eradicated and monitoring, like I said before, these are sites that we did not see any regrowth, and that's about 50% of the sites. So this is really showing some good progress. And in addition to that, we cut 140 sites across the township, which leads to a total of 78% control in Georgian Bay Township from Georgian Bay Forever. Another way that we'd like to show our progress is that if we divide this up into our recurring sites and our new sites of 2021. So recurring sites are all the different locations that Phragmites has been found prior to 2021, and we have 85% of those recurring sites under control. This year, like I said, we found approximately 100 new sites, and of those we were able to get almost half of them under control. This is a zoomed in image of the Severn Sound area. The colors represent the same thing, but what you will see is that there's a lot of red, meaning a lot of untreated sites from 2020. And this year we were able to get to some of those sites due to our progress in the more northern areas. We were able to relocate our efforts down into Severn Sound a bit more, but we did find an immense amount of new sites down here. So as you can see, sort of on the southwest end of Green Island, a lot of new sites found. Now, this is partly due to sites being untreated from years before, but it could also be a factor of lower water levels this year, which increased wetland vegetation growth in general, but that also includes invasive Phragmites. But again, due to our efforts in the Honey Harbor area, it's really, really well controlled, almost 100% controlled. And that's going to allow us in hopes to get down to Severn Sound more with more time and more effort in 2022. So our program is working. Our sites are decreasing in size and density when treated. I would just like to reiterate, when we cut invasive Phragmites, it does take multiple years to get rid of. So cutting it once doesn't mean it'll be gone forever. We have to come back every year. But fortunately, when we do come back, the sites are smaller. We had 140 cuts conducted by 2 staff members, as well as 100 volunteer hours dedicated through 3 community cuts, including Corey Island, Green Island, and Roberts Island. In addition to this, we had Corey Island sites tackled by the Invasive Phragmites Control Center, who we contracted out to cut with these amphibious machines called truck saws, and they cut 2 incredibly large, highly dense stands. They did this in September, and it's in this map on the north end of the island. This large red polygon represents the area of high dense monoculture stands of Phragmites, and the yellow represents spots that those truck saws were able to cut, and they were able to do this in 2 days, which with us would have taken weeks to do. But we were not able to get all of it. So in 2022, our plan is to continue this work with the truck saws to tackle this large area. And just at the bottom right here, we have a yellow polygon, and this is where we did our community cut at Corey Island. And these were smaller size stands, but we were able to get a lot done. And I'm going to pass it over to Heather now, and she is just going to talk a little bit about the bigger picture of invasive Phragmites.
Yeah, I will just talk super briefly and focus it more towards roads and MTO. We all know that Phragmites doesn't respect borders, and we see it on roads and highways, and those are spread vectors to the coast, where we've all just spent so much energy trying to eradicate these. So it's really important that we keep pushing the Ministry of Transportation, as well as other municipalities around us, as well as your own municipality, to manage the roads. And part of the efforts this year was we teamed up with the Township of the Archipelago, and we had an invasive Phragmites road management webinar where we invited municipalities from all around Georgian Bay, and we ended up with 54 municipalities participating, including Georgian Bay Township, who had 3 staff members attend. And it was a webinar about how to do road management on your own roads, but as well, we had MTO present there. And we've been pushing hard on MTO, and they were able to indicate what they had done in 2020 and their plan for 2021. And we've sort of visually seen that they've done some things, but there are still some gaps to close in terms of their, for instance, transparency. I mean, are they getting to 50% of the stands? Or are they getting to 75% of the stands? Nobody knows. Are they getting to all the secondary highways? What are they discussing with each municipality? These were all kind of transparency gaps that were identified in the webinar. So we had some suggested resolutions, both on roads and just for the bigger picture in terms of joining with other groups in managing Phragmites. And I think you can find those resolutions in the deck that we sent out to you. But we suggest considering these resolutions as a way to help the bigger picture for Phragmites management. Over to you, Nicole.
Thanks, Heather. So just to wrap up now, for 2022, we will be asking for $25,000. This is the equivalent to 2021, and this is for hiring 2 students to continue mapping and cutting efforts across Georgian Bay Township, as well as educating the community and spreading awareness. A part of this, we were able to do a few community cuts and attend community events, which we hope to do next year as well, all COVID-19 dependent. And in addition, we really want to continue the truck sort work at Corey Island. Corey Island is a beautiful spot that is really becoming infested with Phragmites, and if we don't tackle that now, then it could run into some serious trouble soon. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us today. And Heather, I don't know if you want to add anything or not before we finish off, but otherwise I think that's all we have for today.
That was really great, Nicole. I'll just add one small thing is because of our efficiency that we've learned over the years, Nicole, with the 2 students, was able to get to a lot of new areas, and that's why there was so much increased new stands that you saw.
Thanks, Heather. So if there's any questions.
Thank you. I appreciate the presentation. If you could stop sharing your screen, it would be appreciated.
For sure.
So that we can see everybody's faces a little more vividly. And council, any questions of either Ms. Carpenter or Ms. Sargent? Ms. Douglas, Councilor Douglas.
I'm a Ms. today to you.
I know it's both are said with respect.
I thank you. Nicole, Heather, thank you so much for your presentation. It's greatly appreciated. And yeah, I commend you for the progress you've made with this. It's a really important thing for our township to, in my opinion, to continue to support you. It's amazing to see the progress you've actually made. So thank you so much for your presentation today. And it looks like you're getting to it. It's a hard one for sure, not having everybody involved with the MTO and so on. I understand the frustrations there, and hopefully the gap can close there as well. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councilor Jarvis.
Yeah, I too appreciate all the work that's been done. Two questions. One has to do with national parks. I know of one stand I've kayaked by, significant stand on the backside of Bosley Island. Is there any coordination, direct coordination with parks?
Yes, so we do work with them. I have a contact with the parks that because we as well find sites that are on parks property, but we don't cut ourselves. So we kind of let them know where these sites are that we're finding. We worked with them with Bosley Island or Georgian Bay Islands National Park for many years, and maybe Heather can speak more to it because she's been around longer than me. But they did have trucksaurs at Bosley Island this year, and they were able to do some work on their shorelines. But aside from that, I don't have a report from them of any further progress.
What I can say is that a couple of years ago, they applied or got significant monies from the government, and we worked with them as well as Dr. Janice Gilbert, the sort of guru of Phragmites in the province, around making plans for Beausoleil. So while, I mean, these will have to happen over a number of years, but there was some progress last year, and then I think significant cutting was done this year. And there's a little bit of that in the sort of text report that I think that we gave you, but it's going to keep going for a couple of years. So they are tackling Beausoleil. Like, those stands are kind of really scary and astonishing. So it's important that they get tackled for sure.
Okay, and then the other question has to do with follow-up. I know you guys did extensive work at Lily Pond Bay and Honey Harbor a while back. And I noticed along the road that there are Phragmites, not a massive stand like what was there, but obviously if there's some, there's going to be more. What do you do in the way of follow up in the areas that you've done big harvesting, and then when do you go back and sort of clean up what's left type of thing?
Yeah, so I think I know exactly where you're talking about. We did see that this year, and the students worked on it a little bit, but they just didn't have time to finish it. We did have some volunteers as well that wanted to take that on their own. So we do still check it, and we will be checking it every year. I know that there is some growth that's near Lily Pond that's on the roadside, and that's kind of where we have to we need that support from MTO to get involved as well.
Oh dear. Okay, well actually that's a private road. I believe that's owned by that's Delaware property. You might want to talk to the owner of the Dell too.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
Okay,
think
thanks.
that's really important. If that's a private road, like I said, we have the taped sort of different how-tos on what to do for roads or get started. So now that we know it's a private road, we will reach out to Delaware Inn.
Okay, great.
I can say in terms of Lily Pond, I understand, like, we went in there for a couple of years and with the trucksaurs, and where we went in has basically been like, we don't need trucksaurs in there anymore. So it's just a handful of stuff now that
Oh
we're
yeah,
talking.
it's small compared to what was there. Very
Yeah.
small.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, thank you again for your report. It is greatly appreciated, and I'm sure your request will be well considered by council as we continue down our budget deliberation road. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Karen.
Okay, I have moved by Councillor Rienko, seconded by Councillor Douglas. Be it resolved that the Committee of the Whole adopts the agenda of October 13th, 2021 as circulated. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Did anyone register for the open forum, Ms. Way? Well, then we will skip over that step. And we now, I believe, next on our list is a Blackline interim report to be presented to us.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Mr. Nass, the council and the monitor, if you will, or the screen is yours for your report, please.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, great. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. Please let me know if there's any issues or delays by either putting your hand up or just reaching out. Let me know. I've put together a short agenda today. We'll cover off where we are with the current situation from the review that we're conducting, the opportunities that we've identified so far, and then the road ahead, what happens next. Just as a reminder, I always think it's helpful when we do these reviews because times does lapse between when the RFP came out and the meetings that we've had, the one-on-ones and so on, and completing. But did want to just set the context. The review of this. There was one done. I think the previous one was 2013, 2014 by another firm to look at the operations of the municipality. There's three main objectives for this review. One's to evaluate and identify opportunities for improving and streamlining processes. The other, which I think is the main important one, which is number two, is are we set for the future in terms of our service delivery model and how we deliver those services? So do we have it set up in a sustainable way for us to continue to deliver services? And lastly, opportunities that may improve or change some of the service levels that you have today. The intent is not to cost cut, but it is to make sure that the service delivery model that you have is fit for purpose for the future. I thought it was important to really set a bit more context as well, because as we've gone through this review and as we've reviewed other organizations, other municipalities in the past year, so the pandemic, it's really important to understand kind of that cause and effect. And what I've tried to do here is, as simply as possible, kind of map that out a little bit so you can see that. And I just want to speak to it because, the cause of some of the changes that have happened during the pandemic, especially some of the lockdowns, has caused some of the increase in volume and I think some of the issues and challenges that the township is experiencing today. I don't think these are going to be revolutionary. I think, you've probably hear them from some of the residents that you interact with and potentially from the administration of the township. But from a cause side, obviously the lockdowns of individuals haven't been able to necessarily travel abroad. They've been working from home or have the more ability to work from home and a larger workforce doing that. As well, staff are taking less time off at least over the last kind of 18 months or so. Maybe it's started to change a little bit. What that means is that there's been greater disposable income. There's also a desire to spend more time in Ontario and lower density population areas. And what that means for Georgian Bay as a whole is that residents have been investing into their asset, their real estate, in either new buildings, expansion of the existing facilities, and so on. So they've been investing. One of the other things that's quite evident is that the traditional season is no longer the case. The May 2-4 Victoria Day to Labor Day, that season for some of residents is no longer accurate. It's a much longer season. As well, I think lastly, there's an economic gap that I think has increased between some of the population segments. What does that mean for the township itself? Well, overall, higher work volume, whether it's the number of permits, applications, complaints, bylaw infractions. So there's a number of work volume increases that have occurred. Expectations have changed as well, and especially with people spending longer periods of time up at their residence. The expectations around how they do things, how they go about doing things, has changed as well. Obviously, over the past several years, the delivery mechanism has changed from being able to come into the township and do things face to face. It's been minimized to only certain channels, which again can cause some frustration and issues with the residents. Greater contention, I think, is one of the things that have come through on our survey between kind of permanent and seasonal residents as a consequence of some of these things, as well as property value making some of it unaffordable. And then overall, again, increase in traffic. It's been much busier. Lastly, I think it's important that from a township perspective, this does heighten the risk around staff burnout and mental health issues. So I think it's important just to paint that picture as we go through the rest of the observations. As we do these reviews, definitely cost is one of the things that we do look at to make sure to see how you've been spending money where and what that looks like for the future. So generally, one of the things that we have identified in the general theme is that the township's been extremely cost efficient over the past few years and may require some further investment because of some of the impact of the changes in the seasonality of some of the residents and the overall work volume. One of the first observations we had is around resident expectations are changing. Obviously, the amount of time that they're spending, but then also the services that they're consuming. There's more of those things that they want, and they want it quicker. Township is extremely cost efficient. There's a couple of different metrics that we'll go through and that will evidence, at least from our perspective, why I believe that's the case. Organizationally, we are looking at the organizational structure. By and large, it's in line with common practices. We do look at kind of spans, reporting lines, what's contracted out, where you're using shared service and so on. By and large, it's in line with common practices. However, there are some things that we're looking at that we do think that would be some opportunities to improve the overall structure so it's suitable for the future, as well as making sure that you've got the right resources in certain places. And lastly, use of technology. There's a plan for implementing a new ERP system, but overall what we found is that there's still opportunities for advancing some of the how services are delivered, not just from a resident perspective and self-service, but also what that looks like internally and how we streamline some of the processes once it does come into the township. We typically, when we do these reviews, as we assess the different services, we do what's called service profiles. So we ask departments to fill out forms, and we also gather documentation to compare and look at where do you have service standards? Do you understand what the work drivers are? Do you capture those? Are you able to perform analysis on those services and work drivers? And I think one of the things that was evident as we went through this, and I think senior management team would also agree, is that it was quite difficult to gather some of this information. And part of that is, making sure that you've got the systems in place to be able to track some of that information very efficiently. So that's definitely one. And then secondly is making sure that you have the practices in place to then also, from a management and staff perspective, to be able to use that information. So as we go forward, there is the plan for the new ERP system. I think that's going to be very important to establish that and then make sure it lines up to the different areas of the departments to make sure that they're being able to capture that information, analyze it efficiently. Training will be an area that I think will be very important to make sure whenever you buy a new system that you're able to use it to the fullest extent possible. As you can see here on some of the graphs, the service standards, we did it by the different departments and kind of service area. You can see that overall, service standards exist, yes, but many are not quantifiable, so they're qualitative. And for me, that would also a sign of maturity in terms of what I would expect to see is as you implement the new ERP system, that you're able to track more of this and then change some of those service standards so that they're quantifiable. That will then also help you manage better expectations with residents, as well as a greater internal efficiency. Same with the work drivers on that case as well. Lastly, I do want to provide some recognition that the township, compared to maybe some of the other peers that we've worked with over the past year, was able to quickly mobilize staff to work from home. So I do think there's kudos though in terms of being able to mobilize the workforce to work from home or work remotely. So that is quite good. I think the next part is then what does that mean and what does that look like in a hybrid model? So it's all well and good when you're working, most people are working from home or in the office, but when you've got a mix of both, that can add some complications. With that being said, what we'd be looking for are changes to making sure that processes are efficient, people have clarity around rules and responsibilities between the different departments, making sure you've got the technology to help streamline those activities internally. We'll get into the cost side of things. One of the things that we do like to look at, and I'll draw your attention to two lines, which is the orange line and the black dotted line initially. So the black dotted line is consumer price index, and the orange line is the overall tax rate that you have for the township. What we like to do in terms of analysis is peg a year. So we use 2014 as a baseline year. And what this graph shows you is the percentage change year over year. So has it gone up or down, or has it, just been flat? And as you can see, the two lines are fairly consistent between 2014 and 2016 in terms of their trajectory. At 2016, then it starts to shift, and you see that divergence. The reason why this is important is obviously the CPI. While it's not the best indicator to compare because it doesn't really represent all of the basket of goods that a municipality would purchase and the cost, it is at least an indicator to show that costs are increasing. And for me, what's important is just to highlight that the overall tax rate, there was a dip there and now it's starting to trend upward, but there's a gap. And for me, that may have caused underinvestment in some of the services that could lead to some areas being a little bit leaner than where they should be. We also looked at this from a kind of year over year. So for me, it's really important because I do think some of the challenges that you see today may not have been caused in the last year or two. It may be, 5 or 6 years ago. We also did a comparison to peers. And again, this is again, just another data point that we like to use to understand a little bit around the expenses. And given that there's a high seasonality with some of your population, we use households as kind of a common denominator for them. As you can see from the graph, this is looking at the overall operating expense. So it's excluding amortization. So it's just looking at your operating expenses for the most recent year. And you can see Georgian Bay is right at the bottom. Your peer group we've highlighted in that kind of greenish color or aqua. All the other gray dots are municipalities in Ontario. So that's what it shows you, just in terms of to give you some perspective. But as you can see here, you're right at the bottom. It could mean several things. That one, you're more efficient from a cost perspective than your peer group. Two, it could mean that you have lower service standards than your peer group, and that's why you're able to have lower expenses. Three, it could mean you've got a backlog as well. So this doesn't, necessarily say that you're on top of things, or it can be a combination thereof. We double checked. There was one other thing I wanted to check, which was, are you paying compensation wise? Are you comparable with your peers? I think the last one was done in the last 3 years or so. So it does indicate that, assuming that hasn't necessarily very changed with your peer group, then all things being equal, it's probably one or a combination of these. For me, this really confirms something, which is making sure that any of the changes that we recommend that, some do relate to cost savings, but really we need to focus on making sure that, is this the right model that we have, and how do we make sure that it's sustainable going forward? On the workforce side, it's usually the majority expense item. So salary and benefits or contracted services. So what we like to do is to look at that. We've found in our experience that each municipality is quite varied when we do a comparison of full-time, part-time, volunteer, contracted. So it's very difficult to normalize that. But what we can use, which is a better proxy, is the workforce expense, where we look at salary and benefits and contracted services. We combine that together, and then we're able to compare that to other municipalities. And as you can see, again, Georgian Bay, you're right at the bottom end in terms of the workforce expense per household. So again, super efficient, but in many cases, you're below in what your overall workforce expense, which means that you probably have a smaller workforce delivering a similar amount of work. The dotted lines in here are just lower tiers, and then obviously you can see your peer group. So from my perspective, this is one thing that's really helpful to make sure that we're able to identify where maybe some of those workforce expenses are a little bit lower. When we broke it down further, and we did do year-over-year comparison as well in the interim report, it's an ongoing trend. So we went back to 2012 actually just to see where that was. when it started, and you're well below your peer group as well as just the Ontario average. The only area that you were in line was planning. All the other areas were actually you're below. So for me, again, an indicator that maybe we've been a bit too lean on the staffing side. Opportunities. So what we've been able to do is from a number of different sources, and I hope you recall from our kickoff meeting when we had that a few months back, we use many different data points to vector in. So we don't want to just have information from interviews that say, we think this is an opportunity. We look for evidence from other data points to substantiate those opportunities. So the data points, where they come from, stakeholder interviews, so that's with management, that's with council members, that's with staff. We also did a resident survey, which for me, given the response rate, is almost more like a focus group. So we've been able to use that. We had a staff survey as well that went out requesting information. We gathered documentation and did an assessment of that. We did a peer analysis where we did interviews with your peer groups. And then obviously the service profiles, we use that as a vehicle to capture information and analyze it. From there, then we're able to analyze and vet the opportunities. What we look for is commonality. We look for where there's data points that support each other to then validate those opportunities. We collapse them down and we start categorizing them. And as you can see then on the, right-hand side of the page, we've broken it down very simplistically into 3 categories: people, process, technology, and equipment, and then 2 different aspects: service improvements, which would be things that are going to improve the service, so that's the outcome or the benefit of the opportunity, or efficiency. And efficiency, just we're going to be quicker or better at it. So those are the 2 categories. And as you can see the breakdown there, you can see the numbers that fairly even split in distribution across the different areas, which is great. But you can see that obviously the process area has a slightly higher number of opportunities as compared to people and equipment. Just to give you a flavor of some of the opportunities that we're working on and that are included in that 37. So from a people aspects, that covers a number of different areas around relating to people, organizational structure. So we do have a few opportunities looking at shared services and working with different organizations. Training, making sure that we've got appropriate training for management, staff, and cross-training so that we're able to manage work volume even when a certain individual isn't there, but maybe we require a certain certificate or training. We're also looking at clarity of roles. So there's a few opportunities that relate to handoffs between different departments, making sure we've got good clarity of roles between those individuals. From a process perspective, as you'd expect, streamlining processes, we use Lean to then assess many of the processes, but also there's some more broader opportunities that we've been able to identify. So time and attendance, which we believe is an opportunity to streamline that. There is a technology component to it. Some of the process activities are related to or dependent on certain technology. We've done a deep dive into some of the planning application processes to look at that, and we do believe there's opportunities there to streamline that. Customer service standards, updating that to make sure that we were able to measure those service standards, and then also hopefully then also report to council and track them with customers. And lastly, keeping our policies and procedures up to date. I think COVID has also shifted, I think, many policies and making sure that they're accurate and up to date. So again, making sure that those are appropriate. And then lastly, technology and equipment. Looking at everything around automating activities, the use of data and analytics for management staff so that they can improve continuously services, and making sure that we're able to provide residents, whether it's on the phone, in person, or online, with a customer experience that is consistent. Lastly, the equipment side, making sure that field staff do have the right equipment, that they're not traveling excessive kilometers to get access to equipment, and that they have everything that they need to be most efficient. Last slide. Right now, and in terms of next steps, we're working with the township We've identified the opportunities. SMT is reviewing that, or senior management team is reviewing that. They're providing us feedback on which ones they believe are priority ones. Blackline's done an assessment already to provide our assessment of what we believe are high priority opportunities. After that, once we have agreement, Blackline will then focus on what we call mini business cases, and effectively, I've put a little section in here which describes it. For each business case, there'll be a description of the situation. What is the problem? What is it? Why are we doing something? What's the rationale for it? And then what's the recommendation? What's the step-by-step activity the township should undertake to implement the opportunity? What are the benefits that we should expect? If it's quantifiable, we will quantify those savings, so either efficiency or cost savings. It could also be qualitative, which is fine. Financial impact, what's the cost? So we do try to give you, where possible, indicators of costs. What are the potential risks and roadblocks? And then any assumptions that we've used for planning. So effectively, in the final report that we'll bring back to council, it will include basically mini business cases for high priority opportunities. We'll also work on an implementation plan of those opportunities. We typically like to look at it from a dependency perspective first, and then we'll work with senior management team to then overlay current planned initiatives to see, are there synergies, are there better timing to do some of these activities, so we come back with a realistic plan for implementing it. And then finally, feedback from staff and management to make sure that what we've put together is accurate and complete before we present it to yourselves. Those are all the slides that I had. I'll stop sharing so that we can see each other and answer any questions that you might have.
Well, thank you very much for that. I'm sure there'll be a number of questions and discussions as a consequence of all this. But I'm going to ask you one quick one before we get into what everybody else has come up with, and that is, on the slides you are showing us relative to all the other municipalities in the province, expenses per household and that sort of thing. Did you take into account single tier versus two-tier municipalities? Because I would imagine that we spend a lot less per household than many, simply because we are a lower tier versus a single tier municipality.
We did a separate graph which was looking at just lower tier as well. All it does is it takes away some of the gray dots, but it doesn't change the where you are. As it relates to the workforce, that is purely just lower tier, and partly because I did want to. It's a bit confusing when you look at the upper and lower, to split it out. So that's why I did want to take all of those dots off. So yes.
Okay, thank you. I see Councillor Cooper has his hand up. We'll start with Councillor Cooper, please.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and John, a good presentation. I hope I don't have 20 questions, but I have a few questions I wanted to ask on the way through. Just an observation, you talked about the township being extremely cost efficient, and that's quite exciting, but an observation, unlike 98%, 99% of the townships, municipalities in Ontario, 50% of our residents are water access. And you're aware of that, I'm quite sure, but the services that they demand are rather limited. Mm-hmm. And so we may not be talking about apples and oranges, or we may not be talking about apples and apples, but rather apples and oranges. So I just wanted to talk about that. To have you, I'm sure you've given it some thought, but I think it needs part of our consideration. The other sort of area that you talked about that relates to this is lower service levels. And I'd like to suggest, in relation to what I've just said, there's another sort of line here, could be less service required. So it's not just handing out less services, or a lower service level, but actually less service required would be another sort of category for consideration. So that was one thing I wanted to sort of mention. Secondly, and when you think about, before I move on, those things, there's, virtually no road maintenance, clearing, no curbside pickup, there is, solid waste at marinas, and that's the main service our water access residents get. So, and given that's 50% of our township, it is a significant factor. So I'd like to mention that. And the other thing is that I don't know whether you polled these two, but when I've tried to get sort of comparators for our township across Ontario, the only three I can find, one is the township of the archipelago, which is even more water access and seasonal than we are. Carling adjacent to it. So Carling is outside Parry Sound. And the third one is Leeds, Thousand Islands. So the Thousand Islands and the area around there, which has some sort of urban areas, but also the Thousand Islands is very similar. Really hard to find anywhere else that's even the least bit similar to our township. So it makes it, from a comparison perspective, I would suggest pretty challenging to find comparisons apples for apples. Can you comment on that, please?
Okay, you've said a lot there for in terms of questions, but just bringing it back to the expense side and the I think your first comment was around service levels. I would agree. I think that it's not about increasing. I'm not suggesting that you increase service standards. I actually think one of the first steps, and we've seen this with some of the other municipalities, is really making sure we structure what is the right service level. Understand what are we delivering today, and because you don't have that data today, it's hard to make that baseline. Because you could find, and I'm sure we would find, that certain services you say, yeah, that's fine where it is. Others we need to increase it. Maybe others we need to decrease it. We can, or it's seasonal, and we can make some of those changes. So I think the challenge with the service levels and managing kind of service standards is, one, getting the data, creating that baseline, and then being able to say, right, from here, then let's see which ones we need to change as we go forward. From the waterfront, water access only, Councillor, I think one of the challenges I see with that is, are the services equitable? And you raised the example of road service. Well, everyone has to effectively pay for road service, even if whether you're getting it or not. For me, what I would want to focus in on is for the residents that are water access only, what's most important, and how do we make sure that for the services that they are very much interested in getting, that we're able to give them a good quality of service? Because I do think that's, at the end of the day, you want to service all your different kind of segments of your residents. So I do think that's an important aspect, and one that we are looking at. In terms of the comparisons, yeah, I completely agree. Archipelago is probably, from this group is at least from the peer group that was given to us, that we've assessed, that's probably the one that's got that water access only. For the other ones, effectively those other municipalities would be a gray dot, and it would be very easy for us to map those onto the analysis and see where they stand. So that's an easy takeaway for us to include, so you can see where they stack up in terms of the operating expense per household as well as the workforce. So I'm happy to take that away, and we can take a look at it, yeah, and see.
Okay, thank you. Other question, Councillor Jarvis.
I appreciate all the work, but something that really struck me is that your community survey analysis, and you said it ended up sort of being a focus group. In the end, you ended up getting responses from 68 people in the community, and out of our total population, that is what percent?
Not a lot.
Yeah, I'm wondering,
and that's why I do preface it. I say, that's fine. You've gotten feedback, and I think you look at it as a user group, like a focus group, rather than.
Yeah, I'm reluctant to even consider any of the information that's provided through that part of it as particularly useful until we get more input. That was my only observation, though. I agree with Councillor Cooper that if you can get those other couple of dots onto the graph, so we have some more relevant comparators, that would be great. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Happy to do that. Yeah, absolutely.
Councillor Hazelton.
Thank you, John, for your presentation. Are you, what's your ask of us today? Are you looking for us to make comment on what we've been reading, or what?
Purely informational, and partly what I've found helpful for some reviews, especially ones that maybe has a longer time frame. I'd hate to come to you. You saw it at the beginning when we kick things off, and then you see it at the end, and it's a complete surprise. And for me, I want to make sure that you've got a sense of what the type of analysis that we've done, where we're heading. So it's more of just for information. Yeah.
Okay. Do you mind if I just make some observations along the way here?
Please.
So I found the presentation interesting, but I found the report far more interesting. And what leaped out at me when I went through that was, for example, service standards not being met over, almost 50% or more, almost across the board, except in a couple areas. That just kind of jumped out at me. That's a bit of a challenge. And so clearly that must be an area that you're going to focus on in providing recommendations on how to deal with it. I suspect from some of the stuff that I've read that there is an inability to understand much of this service delivery because there's no tracking mechanism in place to be able to do that. And you're kind of pinning your hopes on the ERP system to do that, or a CRM system or something that might come along down the road here. But to reiterate what Councillor Jarvis said, your survey of the community demonstrates that we don't have an ability to communicate with the community. You have gone out of your way to tell us that that we can't communicate with the community, and you called it out specifically that we need email addresses of the community so we can communicate. And your focus group response clearly stated that email was the channel of communication that they would prefer, assuming that's a valid response. So I guess what I'm seeing there is hearing volumes from your report that email communications with the community is critical, which we can't do today. So that's a problem. Just I'm going to jump around a little bit if you don't mind. You talk about us having a population of 5,000, and I can't quickly get to the numbers again here, but I think you probably know that our population is 18,000 according to the district records. That our summer population is up around 18,000. And so what we have is this real anomaly, as kind of highlighted by Councillor Cooper, that we've got a massive number of what often people call seasonal residents. If they could get to their properties year round, they would, but they can't, and so they don't. So we have this massive population that is so different than almost all these other communities you've compared us to. And I'm just wondering, as did Councillor Cooper, that the comparisons may not be as relevant as perhaps we want. I was intrigued with some of the feedback from staff. I'm going to pick on one here. It specifically said complaints should come directly from customers and not from council. And I'm going to state something here. The councillors have all heard me state this before, but we have some areas of our community where the residents in that community are physically fear for their safety if they complain about other neighbors in the community. And so the only only path forward for a complaint to be lodged is to have it go through the counselor, where the resident can deliver this and essentially remain anonymous, although the complaint is not anonymous. I think that, as you go about looking for ways of improving and efficiencies and streamlining things, that you do need to understand that that is a characteristic in our township, where there are people that fear for their safety if they complain about their neighbor. And I would like to think that we could fix that, but we can't. But I think your process, your people process and technology revisions may have an opportunity to kind of deal with some of that. But I think staff need to be very, very understanding that there are an enormous amount of complaints that would like to come into the township, but people fear that they're going to piss off their neighbor, or they fear for their safety from their neighbor. And that isn't just noise complaints, it's all kinds of complaints. So I think that that's something that I would ask you to kind of incorporate into your considerations of things. I don't know, I highlighted a bunch of stuff, but I'm kind of scrolling through it here and can't find too many things. Oh, here we go. Solid waste services not in line with council and resident expectations. I love the fact that you suggest that we renegotiate the contract with the district, or we take over the management of solid waste services. I love that comment. If I could amplify it tenfold, I would. But all I can do is highlight it in my version of your report. But this is a problem which we learned about 2 years ago. In the last 2 years, I would say we've made zero progress on solving the problem. I applaud you for hearing, identifying, and reflecting that as, in this case, number 9 of the initial opportunities. That's great. It made the top 10. So thank you very much for that. I did have a question here, though. On number 12, you talked about sustainability as cover most areas, but not all. I'm not sure I understood that, but could you help me understand what you mean and where you see that fitting? Just if I could ask.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, sustainability, I think, anyone that turns on the news, it's been a topic for, at least the past probably 3 years, if not more, as a growing concern. One of the things that when we looked at sustainability and the role that you have is, how does it relate to the areas that sustainability should cover? And for me, there's a couple of key areas. Right now, I would say sustainability is tightly coupled with economic development. Sustainability in other municipalities, usually larger ones, but I think when you think about what sustainability should cover, obviously there's things around the infrastructure, the assets that a municipality operates and maintains. There's also waste, solid waste, water. So there's the environmental side. So there's other aspects. And then also there's the future planning, which is around planning and development, making sure that, one, protection, but also making sure that as the township grows, are we thinking about sustainability? Do we have that lens that we're applying to it from official plan and development? So those are some of the other aspects I'd say when, sustainability does cut across many different aspects. And right now, does that role focus on, does it cover those areas? Is it involved, or is it focused on one area? And I think there's opportunity to expand kind of that sustainability lens across. That's what the intention of that wording is meant to.
Okay, I have to confess I'm still a little confused as to the relevance there. I would have thought solid waste would have fit into more of an operations area. Anyways, I'll just leave that as an unknown, and perhaps in the future, conversations, you can help us a little bit with that. I picked on a couple other items. These are not top priorities. This is 30, 32, and 35. where you suggest that planning applications are time consuming, and there's an idea or an opportunity to simplify community plans and zoning to improve planning's ability to manage the demand. And I guess what I keep hearing from other councilors is, and I'll echo this, we have a lot of neighborhood plans in our township that reflect the community of that neighborhood. And there has been a lot of work and effort put in to put these plans in place, gain broad consensus from the communities. And I'm not sure that simplifying those and consolidating those plans is really an opportunity. I think that needs to be kind of revisited. You talk about the township's corporate strategy is out of date, and yet I think we recently reviewed it and kind of all agree that our strategic plan is kind of in line with where it should be. So I would kind of just ask you to kind of revisit that. Number 35 is your classic. We don't have emails. We can't communicate with our community. And absolutely, that is, I applaud that. That is an area. In fact, I would love to see that move from item 35 to maybe item number 1 or number 5, because when you can't communicate with your community and you can't find out what it is they really want, then you have to rely on us as counselors to tell you. And I would hope that we have a pretty good read on what our communities want. But back to item 30, there's a lot of community plans in our township. And I'm not sure that each of us are deep enough into those community plans where we can personally reflect those. And I think that we want to continue to rely on those communities to speak up about what they feel is important for their particular areas. And with that, I will thank you and render the floor.
Thank you. Anyone else have any comments they'd like to make at this point? Well, while you're considering, I'm just going to make one quickly, and that is on, I think it was page 66, if my memory serves, of your more lengthy report. You refer to a population of whatever it is, 10 or so municipalities, and that those population figures clearly do not include seasonal, and therefore that renders that column, excuse me, that renders that column, and the column of population per household is basically pointless from our analysis. But I'm glad you used households as your basis for a lot of your analysis, because I think that is a more accurate way of comparison. But the fact is, it's been pointed out that we have water access residents. Roughly half our households are water access only, and well over 3/4 are seasonal, regardless of how you define the word seasonal these days. So I just wanted to make that observation. I'll wait for. I think Councillor Bochek's trying to raise his hand, but I'm not sure.
No, just put my hand up on the armchair.
Okay. Okay, Councillor Cooper wants to go at it again. Councillor.
Just briefly, John, just a couple of things in terms of, I don't want to repeat what's been said, but reinforce. The feedback from our community was very limited. I did hear from some community members that they've had a fair bit of difficulty responding because of the system that's in place, including getting passwords and blah, blah, blah. So that may have played a role in the feedback. So to the other point, we really need to focus on a way of communicating with our community, because that's pretty damn poor. And I'm not saying this is poor on your part. I'm just simply saying that it's pretty poor that we have only been able to reach 68 out of 19,000 that's disappointing. And so I think we have to figure out something. And I think emails is the answer for the future, and the sooner the better. So I just wanted to mention that I had a fair bit of feedback from people that had difficulty signing on. So thank you.
Councillor Jarvis.
I had a follow-up to the comments made by our mayor, and something that came to mind as he was speaking, and I need some clarification if you wouldn't mind there, John. On that page 66, going back to that chart that gives general characteristics for different municipalities, and it lists population and then households, and I'm curious to know how you established each of those numbers. What I'm getting at is, if you have over 5,000 households, how can you have fewer than 3,000 people? I was having a little bit of trouble with that one.
So all the data is from FIRs. So on the bottom of the page, we've got the source. So that's where the information that we've received it from.
And an FIR is?
The financial information reporting that each township has to, or each municipality has to do each year to the province.
So we should be talking to our chief financial officer to figure out how that information is being disseminated, correct?
Yeah, we'll take a double check of it, but we take it verbatim. So whatever's reported in there, that's what we use.
But I think Councillor Jarvis, the households reflect the number of properties that have a residence built on them. But the population probably reflects the latest StatsCan figures of permanent residents only. Hence, when you look at population per household, you see quite a few of these municipalities with less than one person per household, or maybe one, and those are municipalities that have a significant seasonal population.
Got it, I guess, for now.
I mean, you look at Clearview, Springwater,
yeah,
and Clearview, that's listed twice for some reason, at the top and the bottom of the list. But Clearview and Springwater have far smaller seasonal populations, and guess what? They have over 2 people per household.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, I gathered. Okay. Okay, appreciate that. Thank you.
Peter, if I could just ask about this as well. I believe the number we're seeing for Georgian Bay is census, the Canadian census number, very close to the ones I've seen in the past. And I come from one of the many communities on Georgian Bay, and there are about 600 households, probably 2,500 people in just one small community. So we're way off the mark here.
Yeah, anyway. Because it doesn't include seasonal. And you have exceptionally low number of permanent residents, as in that's their tax mailing address in Cognachine.
None.
Well, you might have 1 or 2.
Good luck.
Any other comments that anyone would like to make at this point? Well, Mr. Ness, thank you very much for this update. It's been very interesting. Oh, you
Sorry.
knew that Councillor Cooper would jump in.
I know I'd screw it up again. Oh, well. Listen, based on these statistics that we see here, does that have something to do with the conclusion you came to that we're really cost efficient? Is it based on our population?
No. So we don't use population for any of the calculations in the report. That's just the summary slide of key factors. So we've used household for everything.
Oh, the number of households. Okay, so it's still it has a bearing. Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, thank you very much for this update. A lot of interesting material here. I know I've paged through it a few times since receiving it, and are looking forward to learning further from your suggestions of how you think we can improve our operations for our residents. I'm very pleased, and whether or not it'll affect our next discussion, which happens to be around our draft budget for next year. I'm very pleased to see that we spend less per household than many a municipality, though of course, as Councillor Cooper has already observed, so when you're seasonal, you collect less services from municipality than if you're permanent. However, on the other hand, we probably spend more per household on planning than most municipalities, given the challenges of the geography in which we live. With that, I'll say thank you very much, and we greatly appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about your interim report.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Well, council, next on our list, draft budget report. Are you ready?
Oh, yay.
Good. Well, Ms. Boutiette will sing us a nice song.
Thank you, and through your worship, I will start off with apologizing for the delay in getting the information to you. However, the information that's in front of you today is up for conversation purposes. We have one more draft coming forward, and then the final. So there's still 2 more months of budget discussions. So this is the first draft, the first view that that council is getting of the budget. So I'm just gonna jump right in. And if at any point any council member wishes for me to share any of the information that I'm going to be talking about, I could do so. I just prefer to being able to see all of you and answer questions as we go. This is a conversation and not a presentation. The first stopping point is the attachment 1, which is the operating budget. This is the first draft. There's still some work to be done at the SMT level, and I actually have probably 100 more things to double check just to make sure that I've captured everything or that everything has been adjusted properly. We SMT budget multiple different ways, and I mentioned this last year. Some items are actually identified exact cost. So for example, IT software, we will have a list of all the softwares and what their annual cost is. Some items are based on a trend. We use a 4-year for a trend. These items would be kind of like hydro, where we'll look at where the hydro is going, mostly uphill. And therefore the number that we put there is a higher number than the prior year based on what the percentage increase is per year. Some numbers are based on an average when they're fluctuating, and some numbers have a contingency, such as legal fees, because there's no way to know exactly where we're going to land.
Quick question, Julie, quick question, sorry. Are you on document 1 or 2 in what I have here?
I'm currently going to be talking about attachment 1, which is the operating budget draft 1.
Okay, well, there's another one that's operating budget draft 1, but that's the second one. You're not looking at the graph. It's the first one that's a written report.
No, I'm actually talking about the numbered report, which is attachment 1. The first written report, I'm going to loop back towards the end.
So it's the ATT1 operating budget draft number 1. So it's the second
document.
Attachment, second document. Thank you.
Correct.
Sorry.
No problem at all. I'd rather we all know where we are.
The blind leading the blind.
I hope I know a little bit what I'm talking about. So at the prior committee of the whole, so at the September committee of the whole, we didn't have time to go through the presentation. We were given general guidelines, but at that time, we were trying to find $1.2 million to balance the budget. At this time, and if you see on that very first page of the attachment 1, there's a yellow highlighted bubble for $333,000. So this is the amount we're still short to balance the budget. We've had a lot of conversations. We've cut a lot of, little pieces here and there. We've consolidated the way we account for stuff so that For example, cell phone budget used to be in every departmental budget, but that means that there were rounding. Every budget had round up, 100, $200 type thing. So we consolidated the cell phone budget into the IT budget so that there's only one rounding instead of 10 roundings. So that's the kind of changes that we made to find all of the little sums that make up a bigger sum in the end. So what this 333,000 currently represents is it still has a tax increase, and we will talk about that. And it also is still pulling some monies from reserves, and we will talk about that as well. So it's not a very, like they're in order of transparency, it's not, we didn't cut $1 million right off the top. We had to make some compromises, and those will be presented to you. And we also have today a large list of items that we are bringing forward as the senior management team for discussion purposes. Not all of senior management agreed with the items that we are bringing forward. Some items we didn't agree as a team at all. However, we still put on the list. So these are the conversations we'll have today. Prior to going there, let's discuss a little bit about grants and donations, keeping in mind that, we still have $333,000 that we need to either cut or increase revenues to balance the budget. So I'm moving on to ATT 2, which is attachment 2, grants and donations. So in the column that says 2022 amount, at the bottom, we have 387,937. Maybe get a thumbs up if everybody can see that amount. So that is currently the amount that is in this first draft of the budget. So as we discuss these items, I have an empty column that says suggestion to include from the October 13th Committee of the Whole. So as we fill this column, that number may differ, and depending on what council decides to give direction on. Again, this is not final direction. That number may change. So through you, Your Worship, would you like me to go through each item one by one?
Sure. I mean, we got to see how council wants to react to each of these.
Perfect. So the first one would be Honey Harbor Association. I would like to also note these are not in any order in particular of priority or alphabetical. They are literally just in a random order. So the request was for 10,000, between 10,000 and 15,000. So I'm looking for comments from council.
Councilor Yanko.
Thank you. This is just an overall comment. I see the next one is Gloucester Pool Association. There should be $5,000 in there. They asked for $5,000 for new docks. So I'm thinking, if say Gloucester Pool got 5, 6 Mile got 5, why doesn't everybody just kind of get 5? So why doesn't Honey Harbor get 5? That way everybody's getting the same amount of money for each of the associations and so on. Like I know I can speak for myself and Gloucester Pool when they asked me about how much money I would, would they should ask for, and I said, well, half of what you need. In other words, they're going to share the other 5 or whatever. So I'm just wondering if some of the associations should just get 5 each and so on, and that way everybody is fair for everybody. So I'm suggesting maybe 5 goes to Honey Harbor and put 5 into the Gloucester pool, because I'm sure that I know what that's, I got the email that that's what they wanted. So I don't know how that was a blank.
Through your worship, I can answer why it was a blank. There is a flaw in the form that I had filled out. There was no specific room for the amount requested. Most organization had put it in the text. However, that organization did not. So I didn't have a specific amount to work with, and I did not reach out to them to get the amount. Therefore, that's I take responsibility for that.
Okay, well, maybe you can talk to them, because obviously they wouldn't put a form in if they're not asking for money. So I know it's 5,000, right? They asked me and I said, well, they want 10,000. I said, no, go for 5 and raise 10 yourself. And same with 6 Mile. But so Honey Harbor, why don't we just say 5? But I'm not the Honey Harbor guy. But anyway, if the associations get 5, then everybody gets the same.
Julie, if I may, on that note, we have a lot of associations that are not aware that these funds are being available. So you can put in 5 for Georgian Bay, 5 for Wawatasi, 5 for Cognish. I could go on and on. I think we're trying
Well,
to.
I'm talking about the people who put the people who requested. I'm not talking about giving everybody 5 if they didn't ask for it. If they asked for something, give them maximum 5.
How did they know there was anything available?
Well, I think what I would like us to have answered, I'm a little bit concerned because, you know, I look at something like here, I see 6 Mile Lake gravel for cottage roads. Are those public roads or are those private roads? And the dock for Gloucester Pool, is that public or private? I think what I'm a little bit concerned about, we have in the past given numerous associations $1,000 to run their summer camp or something equivalent. But I think we have to distinguish, are we funding or helping to fund, let me call it a private item, such as docks that belong to an association. I consider that private in the sense that it's not a public service per se, because in theory, if you're not a member of that association, you can't use that dock. Or are we funding a service to the community as a whole? And I know it's not necessarily an easy distinction to make, but I think it's important for us to understand that. Like for instance, where 6 Mile Lake is asking for $5,000 for environmental surveys, that's giving us information about the lake that serves everybody there, which might be a different thing than a dock that may not serve everybody. And I'm not saying that that is the difference, but I think that distinction has to be made here as to, is the money going for something that is a public service? I saw Councillor Jarvis's hand before, and I now see Councillor Douglas. So I'll let the two of you, because I think this might end up being a free-for-all conversation. But in the meantime, Councillor Jarvis, followed by Councillor Douglas.
Yeah, I'm sort of going to work on the sort of along the same mode. I was thinking of the Cottages Association when I was looking at this and seeing they didn't have anything in there. Then I'm thinking, well, when we it was 2000, was it just last year? Or was it the year before we gave money from the municipality to a number of associations, and the associations weren't able to use the money because COVID closed everything down. So my next logical question, and a question that should go out to the associations when it comes to, say, recreational programs or any such expense, is whether they actually use the money that was given to them the year everything shut down, or whether they're just sitting on it waiting to use it when they can use it again, which would be beneficial to both parties. In other words, they wouldn't come looking for money, and two, it wouldn't be part of our budget. But I am also concerned that, I was also looking at those explanations, gravel for cottage roads and docks, yet there was no money associated with that. So those are things I think we need to clarify. Those are my comments.
Ms. Gunby, you've appeared.
Thank you. If I can just interject here and clarify that there are 2 separate grants for cottage associations and community groups. One is for recreation programming and one is for some sort of project. This has been in the works the recreation funding has been in the works for maybe at least 5-6 years. And the other one, maybe about 3 or 4. So that is the difference, if that's not clear.
Councillor Douglas, followed by Councillor Hazelton.
Thank you. Thanks, Jessica, because that was going to be something I asked. So the recreation program that's been in place for, I think, as long as I've been on council, I think there's a criteria around that where there's bills have to come back. Can that be confirmed by you, Jess, by any chance, or?
I know that Brad, I'm not sure if that's the right Brad that's on this call right now, but Brad Sokach and Vivian sort of do the recreation one, so they will know all of the criteria for that.
So I just wondered what the criteria is for both of, I knew there was 2 grants, but I just wondered if we could just get a refresher on what their criteria was, because the reason I'm asking that is I know that our association, just particularly for Go Home Lake, have not, as far as I know, requested any part of the recreation grant because they have enough money of their own. And I think the recreation grant, you needed to provide, you know, the ability to not pay for some certain part of the whatever. But anyways, if we get that just refreshed for us to kind of have that in the back of our mind on this one, is that possible, please?
Yeah, Brad can answer that.
Yeah, there are criteria for recreational programs as well as recreational events, and there is an allowance for capital as well. I don't have the policy in front of me, so I don't recall the breakdowns right now. But they do apply for them, and we have been receiving submissions for the funds.
Oh, okay, thank you. That helps a little bit. I think it would be really helpful for, well, maybe it's just me that doesn't know this, but I'd kind of like to know what the criteria is, because the funding for, sorry, there's one for recreation and one for capital investment. Is that what you said? Sorry. Yeah.
Yes, I'm just trying to get to the policy right now.
Yeah, thank you. That might just help us. I mean, some of the recreation program, it just seemed to me there was a criteria you had to hit, and that was one of the reasons that some of the associations weren't. I know for sure ours and Go Home Lake didn't meet the criteria because we have enough money in the coffers and they don't really feel we need the money.
I don't seem to be able to get into it right now.
Okay. Okay.
If I could just make a comment, I believe we've had an allowance of $500 per association if you have a regatta. And I think we allowed $1,000 to any association that had a summer recreation program. And that's really been in place for at least 5 years, probably more like 10 years. And I think Cynthia is sort of what you were looking for. And I think a lot of our other associations are not really, at least I'm not aware, but that's nothing new, I guess. But this sort of grant monies for capital projects is, I don't think that's very well known out there, to be quite honest with you. So I think it would be only reasonable if we do have something like that, which we may not be able to afford to do, but if we do that, we better be prepared to be fair and give everybody a chance to come at it. So thank you.
Okay, Peter, I think you're on the right track on that one, but anyways, yeah, thanks. That gives me I can tell you the recreation grant's been around since I've been on council. The other one I'm not so certain about, but that kind of gets me to where I want to go. Thank you.
Councilor Bochek.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to come at this from a different point of view. My permanent year-round homesteader residents that pay their tax bills see their money being shelled out to cottage associations, and they don't think that they're getting much value, much return on their investment for that. As far as I'm concerned, the recreation grant has a purpose. It's open for every resident in the township to take advantage of those recreation items. The other one, in times of crisis, when we're looking to cut dollars, I would say we send a letter out saying, sorry, it's just not feasible this year to to facilitate you with your capital funding, and sorry, reapply next year. The recreation one, it's been around as long as I've been a counselor. And it gets used well for swimming lessons and I'll tell you, the Honey Harbor Association has never stopped anyone from taking their swimming lessons over the years that I know of, because I know lots of mainland kids that go to it. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, hey, if we don't have the money and we got to raise taxes in order to facilitate this this granting, I say we cut it out for this year. Don't offer it at all. Thank you.
I'm very curious to see if there is some policy around granting capital money to private associations, because that would surprise me. That just, I mean, it's one thing for operational. Ms. Boutia, you can help us with this?
Through your worship, the policy that we have is about the recreational grants, which you guys have been all talking about. What we're talking about, the capital grants, is actually what we've been doing and bringing them forward to council, and we've done some last year, and we've opened that door for capital requests for non-for-profit and organization groups to bring their requests forward. And I believe that's what we're talking about when we're talking about funding capital projects.
But I think there's a significant distinction between not-for-profit organizations to come to us for funding for an operation that they're doing that particular year. And it could be water testing is one obvious example. I think it's very different than somebody who is, rebuilding a facility for their private group. And I would include docks in that, I include gravel roads in that, I would include, items that the money is going to something that we won't own, but they will own, and that's very different than giving a swimming lesson. And I think we have to, when we consider this, I think we have to make that distinction. Mr. Sokash.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I do have the policy in front of me now. I believe there's typically about $10,000 budgeted for this. So 60% of the funds go towards recreational programming, up to $1,000 per user group. 20% goes towards recreation events, up to $1,000 per user group. And 20% of the funds are available for capital projects, again, up to a maximum of $1,000.
Okay. That's $1,000 is very different than $5,000.
When was that written, please?
Through the mayor, it appears to have been updated in 2016, but it predates me, and I believe I started at the start of 2016.
Ms. Gunby.
Yeah, thank you. The original policy, which I think was just recreation, was in 2014. And then it was revised to include all of these other stipulations and possibilities in 2016.
Okay.
Sorry, for the first one you sent out, then it essentially was what we've had for years, which is the $500 for a regatta and $1,000 for a recreation program.
Yes,
correct, and nothing else for capital projects. And I think I agree with Councillor Bocek that that's all we can afford to do at the moment. We've got a lot of money to find here. Thank you.
Okay, I see 3 hands in front of me. I don't know whether they showed up in order that they were raised, but Bocek, Douglas, and Hazelton is what I see at the moment. So Councillor Bocek, please.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I left my hand up.
Okay, well then we'll go straight to Councillor Douglas.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to put it out there. I think we're in a time right now when we need to be finding money, as it appears to be. And quite honestly, with associations, and I mean, I'm fairly familiar having been president of one, the membership take care of their own. And I don't think right now, while we're in the position that we're in, I think we should strongly take a look at canceling everything for this year to get to where we want to go. Most associations have fairly large memberships. Their membership fees pay for most of these programs, and they budget accordingly what they do. So do we really need to be supplementing that? I mean, it's a lovely thing to be able to do, but at this point, and in these times, I think that all of these grants should just be sort of put on hold for a year. And let's come back and look at it again next year when we may be in a much different environment. That's just my thought.
Councillor Hazelton.
Thank you. I agree that with Councillor Douglas, we need to focus on the critical things. We've got a lot of money to find. And I would say that any program that doesn't have, as the mayor pointed out, broad community township value, that we consider it a project to trash, not in a negative way, but just to set aside for a future time. I'm going through the list here. We don't seem to have moved much past or much further down the list here, but if I jump down through the list here, we have things like the the Georgian Bay Great Lakes Foundation, where we funded them this year. I know from conversations with them that they are working on a program for next year, an expanded program, and absolutely that needs to be included. Up further here to the Georgian Bay Forever Fighting Frag. We just had a presentation on it. Seems like that should also be a critical thing. Georgian Bay Biosphere Reserve, sounds like that again should be another supported thing. I'm not sure we want to increase the funds, but I think that we need to be looking at those kinds of programs that have broad value to the township, and rather than specifically picking out at other things, I'll leave them for you to kind of understand that they're probably not, some of the things here are not broad community value, or if they are, they're not being attempted to be operated by an organization like Georgian Bay Forever or Biosphere Reserve or the Georgian Bay Great Lakes Foundation. I would also like to say, and I know those of you who know that I'm in the Honey Harbor area, I would be quite happy, given the work that we're having done by the Great Lakes Foundation in the Honey Harbor and the Eastern Georgian Bay area. I would be quite happy with sacrificing the SSEA Honey Harbor monitoring. I see that the number's been almost dropped in half. I'm not sure we're going to get much for that anyway. So, there's another 10K that we can set aside for a future year. So I think we need to be very aggressive at cutting things that don't have broad community value. And I think I've heard that from several councillors and the mayor already, and I would certainly support that. Thank you.
Councillor Yanko.
Well, I think my concern is that we're being fair here. What we just discussed now is almost giving $70,000 worth of projects to the Georgian Bay groups. I think I need to fight for the inland groups of getting, it sounds like they're going to get nothing. I have a problem with that. I agree that some of the stuff out in Georgian Bay is important, but maybe this year they're not, maybe we can't afford $70,000 worth of study out in Georgian Bay, and we can't do anything on the inland lakes. Julie, my understanding from talking to you last year and the year before, you would go to carry $5,000 for inland lakes every year without me asking. Is that not valid this year? I shouldn't be talking about that, but the point is that's an ongoing program that we've been doing for over 10, 15 years. So,
all the organizations, through your worship, should be applying for funding. Now, if council chooses to not get an application and fund anyways, that is council's prerogative.
I've never applied for that. We had an agreement that it would be an annual thing, an annual issue. So now you're saying you didn't inform me of that I had to apply. So I'll make an application.
If I've missed an agreement, it is very possible. I will still pull the new card here, and it's very possible that there is an agreement that I didn't review prior to this.
Okay, well, anyway, we've done it many years. Okay, well, I'll have to fill the forms in. But the point is, you know, how much money do you give to Georgian Bay and how much you give the inland lakes? Like, you know, I just want to be fair, and I think we should be, we should be honest here that maybe the biosphere shouldn't, like, for example, the biosphere, they just got a whack of money from the Honeybee Festival. Did they not, or will they not? So why do we give them another 15,000? You know, how much money do they get from the township at Georgian Bay? So something like that, I would question. On the Phragmites, maybe we cannot afford maybe $25,000 this year, maybe 15,000. And we haven't heard from the Great Lakes Foundation yet, but maybe we can't afford $30,000. You know, like, let's be fair here, guys.
Mayor Kutzier?
Yes.
I just have to build on some of that. I think it's important to recognize that we had a presentation, I believe, in September from the Great Lakes, Georgian Bay Great Lakes Foundation, and this is for the water testing program for the entire shoreline of Georgian Bay, starting at Port Severn, running up to 12 Mile Bay. Very efficient use of money, and so I would fight tooth and nail for that, but there's a lot of other amounts in here, including 78,000 or 80,000 for SSEA. We're already covering off Port Severn with the Great Lakes Foundation. So a lot of these need to be chopped or at least reduced. Thank you.
Okay. I'm wondering, because I think we could, I'll get to you in a moment, Councillor Bocek, but I'm wondering, you know, we could go in circles on this, but there's also more to this presentation. And maybe we should hear it all before we decide where we're going to do some of the chopping. You know, I hear, you know, the idea of fairness, but I think that we have to make sure we know the whole story before we decide how we can fairly feel the pain. Councillor Bocek.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought we were going to go through this line by line, but kind of got superseded by individuals moving ahead with it. If we go back to where we started with the recreation grants, could it not simply be something we can strike off right now and say that cottage associations have the ability to apply for their recreation grant and their other one, but that's it, to a maximum of $1,500, and that's it. The rest of it's gone. Wipe it off the budget. So any association can apply for their recreation grant up to X number of dollars, whatever that was. Brad told us, I think it was 1,500, but that's it. Stop it there. Take everything else out of the budget to do with grants to cottage associations. Thank you.
Right. I'm going to suggest at this point, because I fear if we take these 2 pages, we could be talking about them for another hour. And I would like to see the rest of what Ms. Boutiette has to offer. I think there's going to be some other interesting ideas. I know there's some other interesting ideas coming, and I think we should be introduced to them all and then come back to some sheets like this. That's my suggestion at this point.
Perfect. Let's leave this blank for now, and we'll loop back around towards the end. Therefore, I'm going now to the agenda package, which is ATT 3, Attachment 3, Proposed Taxation.
That is, in other words, page 150 out of our 154 pages from this agenda.
I use the digital split screen version, which is my preference, so that I don't have to scroll through a lot of pages of agenda package. So this is representation of what is included in draft one. So for 2022, we included $303,000 of new money, which is a 6.8% of levy change of the general levy, and also 126 of new money for capital levy, which is a 7.5% of the capital levy total, for a total overall change of 6.99. Are there any questions on how these numbers were put together?
I'll ask one question first, but not how they're put together. This 7% increase, that's before we take into account any increase in assessment. Is that correct?
Correct. There's about 1.75 of new growth that I could determine right now. They're still adjusting numbers up until year end. So year to date, there's 1.75 of this 6.99 that is new monies anyways.
Okay, so allow me to round, and then I'll go to Council Jarvis. This is roughly a 7% increase, but it might actually mean a 5% increase on the township portion of current property owners.
Correct.
Which would be less than 2%, given the fact that the township's only 30% of the total tax bill, very roughly speaking.
Again, all the other players, we don't know what their
I understand
what their increase will be as well, and that is kind of reverse mathematics from what council had given as a general guideline at the September Committee of the Whole.
Council Jarvis.
I appreciate the segue back to the September Committee of the Whole discussion, Julie. So how does this 6.99% compare with the number we had in September?
The number we had in September was 22%.
Okay, that was a clarification I wanted. Okay, thank you.
So 2/3 has been cut out of the increase from round one already.
Well, it hasn't been cut out so much as they've taken the money from somewhere else, correct, Julie?
A lot of it has been cut. A lot of it has been consolidated and then cut the rounding. A lot of things were pulled out in its entirety, which we will discuss when I loop back to the operating budget after we've discussed some of the other items such as the organizational chart and the capital budget.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Hazelton, is that a new hand or an old hand? I can't tell. Or don't remember. Okay, I'll take that as an old hand. Okay, Ms. Butchett, carry on, please.
The next attachment, ATT4, is the org chart with summer students. And I have a couple of things that I wanted to share beyond the org chart that I missed putting actually in the presentation or in the report. I'm going to share my screen. I just wanted to show the human resources changes over time in a graph and what percentage of our budget is actually HR.
So you're telling us that our human resources budget compared to our total budget has been shrinking slightly from 47% to 42%.
Yeah.
And our actuals have been below budget.
Yes, and those are usually due to in-year vacancies. So like, for example, in my position, my position was vacant a little bit before it was filled. So that's usually where the difference comes from, because you have to budget for the funds, even though it's not going to be filled for an entire 12-month period.
And because I can't see anybody else's hands, I'll just make the comment that one of the things that we've heard from our residents, we've heard from our council, is that we don't always provide the level of service that they are hoping for. And, you know, and the more you cut people, the less service you can provide. So I think that's one thing that we should take into account, is that if we want to provide service at least equivalent to what we have in the past or more, we shouldn't be cutting human resources. My comment. Anyone else care? Council Cooper.
Yeah, I think perhaps that's fair. I just would like to include that, you know, this is a percentage of the revenue, I believe I saw on that line. It's not in front of me now, so I'm doing it from memory, but we went from 3.8 to 4.4 over 4 years. Now, I didn't have a calculator in front of me here, but that's pretty significant, isn't it, Julie?
Yes, it is. And actually the number that we're looking at, and I will present the 2022 proposed org structure, is actually 4.8.
Oh, so we've had a very big increase in dollars and cents in staffing. Is that not correct?
Almost $1 million over the last 4 years.
Yeah. So that's significant.
Is there a request for me to reshare that graph?
There's a few nods, yeah.
And the 2022 number, I'm just reiterating, is 4.8.
At what percent?
I didn't do the math yet.
What's the budget for 2022?
I'm anticipating, yeah, I'm anticipating probably we'll hit the 11 million in 2022, again, depending on all the decisions that are going to be made.
So our HR budget has been growing very significantly, but as a percentage of our total budget, it's been decreasing. Are you suggesting that we are losing alignment because of that?
I'm not suggesting anything.
I mean, we've heard comments that there are concerns with service levels and things like that, but the numbers you're presenting here show a very significant increase in HR in absolute dollars, but as a percentage, it's reducing. So one either concludes we've been staffing up phenomenally and doing a great job of staffing up to handle the demand, or as a percentage perspective, we're missing the boat and we haven't been staffing up fast enough. And I don't know the answers to those issues. I'd be interested in comment.
Councillor Jarvis, followed by Councillor Douglas.
Just as I'm going to follow up on the thoughts there of Councillor Hazelton, Julie, is there any guidance that can be provided from the Association of Municipalities or anything like that with regards to where this HR number should be or is a general rule, so that we've got some sort of guideline on that? Or is it really everybody's on their own type of thing?
No, I've actually done a lot of homework in terms of the percentage of budget, and we're really right where most municipalities stand. And I've also worked for a few other municipalities, and the numbers usually around the 45 to 55 range. Smaller municipalities seem to have a bigger percentage of human resources in comparison to the total budget, because you need the people to run the operations. But this is pretty much in line with what I've seen throughout my career.
Right. Okay. I appreciate that. So my thinking is that where we're running on the HR side of things seems to be in line. So I have no issue with that, unless of course we feel we need to be, as Councillor Hazelton has suggested, maybe ramping up a little bit more to provide the services people are expecting. But anyway, that to me, it seems to be rather in line, which is I don't have a problem with that.
Councillor Douglas.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just sort of in the same vein as Council Hazelton and Jarvis. Julie, I'm just wondering that the increase that we've had, if that is, it seems to me over the years, we've been trying to bring our staff wages up to par with the rest or with other townships. And if that's been kind of a creeping effect where we're seeing some big jumps over the last few years trying to get to that position. And if that's the case, but that's what I'm trying to, I think that's part of it, just from what I remember from previous budgets and what has gone on. And I'm just wondering if you could just comment on that. And if you, I think you may agree on that one, but are we where we should be? Have we played the catch-up game to the point where now we should be in a place where we are competitive with our employees' wages?
Through your worship, I wish the Director of Human Resources were here to answer that question, but she's on vacation this week. As far as I'm concerned, as far as I know, we have done the market studies. They were applied to both union and non-union. We did a renegotiation with the union between 2019 and 2020. It was done in 2020, but it was retro back to 2019 when the collective bargaining period ended. I would like to say yes to your question, Councillor Douglas. The service delivery review that we're currently undergoing, I think, will address will answer that question with more certainty than I can. I think that's a good question for the consultants when they're reviewing our service levels and where we are and how we offer the services.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Cooper, followed by Councillor Bochek.
Thank you, Julie, and that I think was a very helpful comment. I think we do need comparators, and we should get that. You're talking about the core services review, is that correct? Yes. And it'd be nice to know what the right number potentially should be, but I think we can see here that we've had, as Councillor Bochek pointed out, $1 million increase over 5 years. It's about a 25% increase. If we're not caught up now, boy, we've been doing a lot of catching up already. So hopefully that's sufficient. And one of the things we don't really have, at least not here anyway, is the actual FTE count. Have you got something that you brought out with respect to FTEs over that same period? Because that might also give us an answer. Some people are saying or suggesting maybe we're understaffed or we're overstaffed. Another way of looking at it is through FTEs.
I'd be more than happy to put the FTE count and the entire graph on my draft number 2 budget report.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Bochek.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It kind of touches on what Councillor Cooper was just talking about with the FETs. And you know, back in 2016, we didn't even have a bylaw department. Now we have a senior bylaw officer, a zoning bylaw officer. We have part-time kids in the summer. We didn't have a deputy fire chief back then. We do now. So I think what Councillor Cooper has asked for and you've offered to show on the next draft is very important. Most of these increases have been at the direction of council. You know, we needed more bylaw, we needed more employees. So let's just see where we're at and that'll be super helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Boutiette. Next.
Great. So the next thing I'm going to is attachment 4, which is the organizational chart. Council has it as part of their agenda package, but if you'd like me to share, it just identifies what the proposed structure is for 2022 as it currently stands. Of course, the core service delivery review can propose changes to that. We don't know what the final report will recommend.
Okay.
Eric, can I just interject one
Yes,
idea?
please.
Just before we get off the concept of FTE, on page 61 of the core services review report, it does have a total FTE breakdown by department. It doesn't have absolute numbers, it has percentages. But for those of us who are interested in understanding where things are, that might be a starting point. And I would certainly welcome, Julie, your report included next time. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I think Councillor Bochek made an important observation, is that we have increased staffing over the last few years because we wanted to deliver more service to our residents. By law enforcement being a clear example recently. And I think we have to take that into account, is that are we delivering services that our residents would like to see, taking into account, of course, that there are geographical differences into what services people are interested in and or what they can actually get from us. But as a township as a whole, the more people we have, ideally that means the more services we can deliver. The fewer the people, the fewer the services. It's almost that. Right. I mean, and whether our percentage is 40% or 42% or 44% of the total budget, almost half our budget is people. Okay. Ms. Boutiette, you must have one or two more things you want to deliver to us.
Yes, absolutely. So the total cost of this org structure, if you're still looking at it, is $4,897,347, give or take, with the next review coming for draft number 2. But the number's probably pretty close to where it's going to land.
You're suggesting just shy of $5 million for 40 plus people.
Correct. And I had a very wise person tell me a quote that I'd like to repeat to you. We could provide services fast, good, or cheap, but you could only pick two of the three. So which 2 of the 3 would you like it to be?
Yeah. Councilor Cooper.
Did you say 40 employees? Is that correct? Full-time?
I just made up that number because I think it's going to be in that ballpark somewhere.
Okay, so 40 into 4.8 is 125 for your information. Average.
I do have an FTE count. If council would provide me with just a second, I do have the actual FTE count for this budget. I currently have the FTE sitting at 49.08 people, and how we get to point people is like the summer students, for example, don't count for a full FTE.
So that averages out then closer to 100,000, and of course that 100,000 is in salary. That's salary plus benefits and and related costs, I presume.
102 to be exact.
Ballparking.
I know.
Okay, Ms. Bouquet, what else do you want us to consider as we go through all this?
Okay, I would like to return to attachment 1. We've talked about a lot of the points that affect the operating budget. So I'd just like to go through some of the lines and some of the comments. So the very first page is a corporate summary of the entire organization. I would like council to focus that salaries and benefits should be looked at as a whole, and that's why it references the org structure. The distribution in each of the department is not perfect at this point in time in the draft budget, and it's really never perfect because an employee from Parks and Rec, for example, can work for operations or roads at a certain point in time. So when we distribute the salaries and wages budget per department, it's never really accurate. However, the overall cost for the corporation is pretty accurate. Going down the line, still on that first page under the materials, this contains our overall insurance premium increase of $83,000. And again, the yellow box, that's the amount we need to get to zero. On the second page, I want to stop in the general government section where it says inter-fund transfers. So this is the amount that's in the actual draft 1 budget report that we are proposing to take from reserves, and these are actually we should take regardless if we want to or not, because these are the safe restart funds that have to be used in 2022 that we received in 2021. So at the end of 21, these will transfer into reserves, and in 2022 we'll pull from reserves.
And is that amount there, that 323,500, that represents the safe restart, or they're just a portion of that?
The entire thing.
Okay, thank you. So that has to be taken out of reserves into the budget for next year.
Correct. The funds were to be used in either 2021 or 2022, and we don't anticipate requiring them in 2021. Therefore, we should budget to use them in 2022.
Okay. Thank you.
The next line, still under the general government title under expenses, we have under financial expenses, these are where the grants and loans that we were originally talking about fall, and also long-term debt payments and interest. Just wanted to identify that separately. Some of the stuff that was in there last year that's already removed in order to get to where we currently stand, however, still missing some $333,000. Council endeavors of $50,000 was removed, and it refers to the budget ideas, which we will talk about shortly. We pulled monies from the election reserve because it is an election year. Therefore, we have been putting money aside for the election year. So this is the year we pulled from, and we have additional cost due to the fact that it is an election year. Also during SMT discussions, there was a $60,000 annual CIP initiative, and also encompassing in that was operational grant and reserves. We suggested that, but it's not included currently in the budget. So the reason we would like to have monies available for grants is when something comes up that we don't have to run and pull out of our working fund reserve, which is intended for a rainy day fund, but rather have a fund that's dedicated to granting opportunities. So that is not currently included. I'm scrolling down to page 3. The other item senior management team had discussed, and it is not included, was a $73,000. This would be an annual contribution to OP and zoning bylaw amendment reserve. So these are things that have to be done, I believe, in 4-year cycles. And these costs sometimes between 350, 400,000. So each, therefore, we had proposed to start building reserves for these initiatives. That was in the initial 1.2 million that has now been removed, but was still there as a note. That is a potential thing to start considering. I'm moving on to page 4. And the note on page 4 is the attachment 3 that is the proposed tax levies.
Okay. But somewhere after this, you also have a list of all sorts of suggestions.
Yes, however, before we get there, I still haven't talked about capital budget.
Okay. Well, I'm just conscious of time. And you know, are we going on for another 2 hours? And do people need a little break, or are we going on for another hour and people can weather it?
There's probably going to be significant discussions when we get to the list of ideas.
I would think so.
Have a bio break for a little bit.
So let's take a 10-minute break, and it's now 3:11. Let's reconvene at 3:21, and then we can hit capital and the interesting list of ideas. See you in 10 minutes. 3:21. That's 10 minutes by my clock. And I think most folks are returning. Ms. Boutiette, you were going to talk capital.
Yes,
Let's
through
do
your
it.
worship. We're finally here. Last year, council agreed to allow some time to invest some time into developing the software so that we could have a 10-year capital forecast that is built into the software instead of spending a lot of time tweaking spreadsheets. Here is our very first export of what this software has projected for us. There are still some data gaps that I will admit to, but I'm going to go through each of the sections, and I'm currently talking about attachment 5, which is ATT 5 capital budget draft number 1. So what you're seeing here is each of our asset categories, and these were designed with the user in mind, and the user being staff, senior management team, fleet managers, facility managers, etc. So the system, being a very powerful system, can do a lot of things. For myself and for finance, it projects into the future when life cycle events will need to happen and what the dollar value associated with that life cycle event looks like. I will take the time to explain what a life cycle event is. So for example, we have a boat and it has a motor. We bought the boat and motor as a unit. It's one asset. However, the motor needs to be completely refurbished in 10 years, even though the boat and motor are projected to last 20 years. So the life cycle event of that asset would be the rebuild of the motor in 10 years. So in this graph, you would see that the asset, depending on when it was purchased, will have a life cycle event at 10 years, and then it will have a full replacement in 20. So the first asset category is equipment, and then there are subcategories, which you see there. What we should be budgeting is the 2022 year, but also the backlog. Now, this is not necessarily accurate for the fact that there might be some stuff that, one, we don't have time to do, or that we don't have proper condition data for the item to move it into the future. I would say that based on what I know and the efforts put in so far, the equipment category is pretty well analyzed, and we know what needs to come forward. The facilities category, however, is on the other side. You see, it looks like $12 million is in backlog. That is not the case. Thankfully, we did request through council to apply for a grant to do a facility assessment. So until we have condition data on the facilities and also an expert to tell us how we should componentize the facilities, that's going to be one that we're going to have to exclude of the capital budget and just do it like we did in the past, which is based on staff knowledge of needs for the next year. So it's in this draft. It won't be in the next one. The fleet rolling stock, so that's anything that is machinery and vehicles. That too worked intensively with the fleet manager and the director of operations, of course, to ensure that these line up not only with their life cycle, but also with their conditions. So the difference here is you could assign, when an asset is purchased, a life of 7 years, but you get to year 5 and you're like, ooh, this is rotten and it's, you know, burning a lot of oil. The item probably won't make it to 7 years. So then you assign it a poor condition and it moves it on the timeline to an earlier date. And vice versa, if you have a piece of equipment or any asset that is in better condition than what we originally anticipated on age, it can be moved into the future based on its current condition. The next classification of assets is parks and natural capital. Again, we believe that most of the data in parks and natural capital is correct with the proper life cycle events. Road appurtenances, not. We have still work to do there. We will be removing this segment for the next capital because we usually include it with the road work itself. We don't really have it as a separate asset. So we'll be discussing this, and there's a few sections that will be removed for the next draft, but I just wanted you guys to get a big picture of all of the asset categories we have. And then road network, and we believe we just did a road condition assessment in the summer of 2021. Therefore, the data in our road network is pretty accurate, and you can see there's no backlog. Everything's into the future. With a very scary year in 2025.
I think what you're doing is you're trying to tell all of us don't run for a re-election because next term is going to be on possible budgets.
Did I say that out loud? No.
Yeah, effectively.
And storm sewer system is the same concept. We don't have great data right now. Our main storm sewer system is in MacTier, and it was completely rebuilt in 2019. So we're good for quite a few years. However, we can't ignore it until it does come due. So we'll talk about annual cost of assets as well. So, for example, if we take just 2022, we've got 1.5 million, and then we know we've got a little bit of backlog in most of the categories, excluding a few of the other categories. We're probably sitting at a 2.6 requirement of investment in capital assets for 2022.
And yet on the tax levy that you showed us, it was 1.8. Okay.
Good catch, Mayor.
Just checking.
Yes. So where does that 1.8 number come from? So we still don't have a revised asset management plan, which tells that we'll need to project into the future our replacement costs. So where does the 1.8 come from? It still comes from our 2014 asset management plan, which says that for 2022, the capital contribution from levies should be 1.8. So we are expecting to have a new asset management plan for the November council meeting, or maybe committee of the whole. I'm not quite sure yet where it will go. But these numbers will, well, this plan will then be archived and replaced with the new plan. So how do we fill the gap? That's pulling from reserves or development charge reserves or things of that sort. We haven't yet established the financing Policies. So sorry. I'm just realized that I'm not sharing my screen, so you guys can't see where I'm pointing at.
No, we can't.
This is the 2014 asset management plan that I'm referring to, and where the number of that 1.8 comes from.
Okay. Thank you.
And realistically, if we go back to the proposed taxes, I don't believe that it would be palatable to go any more than that requested amount at this point in time, unless council directs to do so.
Okay. Thank you. Council, anyone want, Council Rienko?
Under facilities, there you, for 2002, you have decommissioning the school. I assume we can talk about this now?
That'll come in the ideas that we're bringing forward.
Yeah.
Well,
so you're talking about $100,000 to decommission the school. That's what it would cost to tear down and level out?
Based on my opinion and our internal subject matter experts, but we have not gone formally to get pricing.
Okay, well, later on when we talk about the list of things that we can do, one of them is to sell that facility. And you talked about $1 million. There you go. Get rid of that facility. We save $100,000 here. We make, I don't know, $1 million or close to $1 million. Your budget issues resolved for 2022.
That's why we have that list to discuss.
Huh? Just one item can solve everything.
Is it council's wish to go to that list now?
Well, if anybody has any other questions about this capital schedule that you provided, we should do those first, and then we should go to that list, I believe. Councilor Cooper.
Thank you very much, Julie. And my only question is that I sort of was, when we went through the various future years, I was seeing some pretty exciting numbers, very large numbers. And I realize that this is set up to address when equipment or whatever becomes whatever, null and void, extinct. But it's, in accounting, I thought you sort of sometimes do whatever accountants call it, smoothing or whatever, where you put some in every year. Whereas, you know, I saw some places where in 2023, there were some very big numbers in there. I just want to make sure that we're not throwing a whole bunch of stuff into 2023 and not being able to achieve that goal. Can you just respond to that for me, or have I got it wrong? Thank you.
No, you're absolutely right. And that is what we call annual requirement. So this is the report for what we're going to do in 2022, but in our asset management plan, we're going to talk more high level about annual requirement, and the annual requirement number, which is kind of what the 2014 plan tried to do, is bring that annual requirement so that the years that we require less capital, we're still going to collect that same amount, so that the years that we have a peak, we can pull from reserves for that. So that's the intent of capital reserves and having a good asset management plan so that we're ready for the peaks, and when there are valleys, we put money into reserves to accommodate for those peaks.
Okay, yeah, it's scary when you look at those cumulative totals and you're talking like $4 million a year average that has to be spent on capital assets going forward. That's a chunk of money.
It is, and I think moving forward, I think even myself, I haven't done a very great job so far when reports are brought forward to portray, when council approves something, the capital cost and the related operating costs. So the annual requirement to, you know, yes, okay, we built an asset and it's good for the next 20 years, but during that 20 years, we should be talking about rehabilitation or replacement of that asset. And I haven't been very good at bringing those things forward in such a way that council has all the information financially to decide to build. And what I'm talking about here is not assets that we currently have, but when we're bringing forward projects for new assets.
But you know, what you're saying here, and I mean really high level ballpark, every household can be expected to invest $1,000 a year for the rest of their lives in township assets. And that's average. So obviously some will be spending $250 a year and some will be spending $2,500 a year. But that's what I'm reading here in effect. And I think we and our taxpayers have to understand that they'll be spending, you know, many hundreds of dollars every single year in capital asset investment. And they have been in the past to some degree, but not quite. Councilor Hazelton.
So thank you again for producing this. It's in some respects scary. And some of the numbers probably need more explanation, but I just wanted to jump down to one, the Port of Honey Harbor, where you show no costs in the future. And yet we have mega docks that are there that will have significant maintenance costs over time. Did that fall between the cracks or something between in your discussions, or like how did it get zero?
Sure. So that's a great point. So what I extrapolated here is a 10-year plan. The Port of Honey Harbor is brand new, right? That doesn't mean it doesn't have an annual requirement for monies to be put aside. And that's kind of where I wanted to bring the difference between the actual plan of stuff we need to do and the actual money requirement for all assets into the future. Now I'm going to see if I can run this report. So let me share my screen, and I think this will shed more light on the question you're just currently asking. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so this is pulling only the Port of Honey Harbor. So you saw that it was not part of the 10-year plan. There's nothing really that needs to be done to rehabilitate. There's no life cycle events that we've identified for the next 10 years. However, this Port of Honey Harbor has an annual requirement of $100,000 a year. So we should be starting to put $100,000 a year right now to rehabilitate this in the future.
Okay, can I just, I think what I heard you say, and I think it is absolutely critical that we all understand it. We as council approve projects and we look at the, the cost of the project, and we may be stretched to be able to build it. But I think this is potentially a classic example of something that we all missed, which is it's not a $2 million grant from the governments. It's a ongoing $100,000 expense allocation forever. And that, if it had been brought to our attention up front, might have changed some people's views as to how appropriate it was. So I would ask you I think what you're doing, what you've said is you want to bring this kind of information forward. And I think that every time we look at any capital project, just because the government gives you money doesn't mean you should take it, because it could have a very significant impact in the future that is going to fall on the shoulders of taxpayers. And I think we need to have that full transparency before we make decisions. But thank you very much for this.
So this was pulling only one asset, but let's say I pull the annual requirement for all assets for 2022, for example, and this is the amount that we're currently pulling 1.8, but technically our true annual requirement, which we will probably see in our next asset management plan, we're far off the mark.
So we are broke, but we don't know it. And we are on the verge of having to tell our taxpayers that they're going to have to receive a mega increase, percentage tax increase, in order for us to be able to continue down the path of maintaining all these assets that we have. I kind of like Councillor Wienko's strategy. Maybe we should be selling some of these assets to relieve ourselves of ongoing burden.
Sell, donate, all of the above. There is a silver lining that I don't want to miss. Capital grants still exist. We should be focusing every piece of capital grants moving forward to the rehabilitation of stuff that we have and not building new stuff. That's just my 2 cents.
Okay. This might lead us nicely into the list, the infamous list in the middle of your report.
Could I put in a quick question?
Yes.
Thank you, Julie. So these are, what we just finished with is a massive number of legacy costs that aren't going to go away unless we sell something or we have some other magic that you're about to show us. But we need to be mindful of this in the future. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going back to the actual report that was written. As I said, I would loop back. I've got a working copy of it, which I can share on screen. And I'm not saying that all of these numbers in here are 100% accurate. I could try to explain as much as I can of where the numbers came from. Or alternatively, you guys could follow along. They're all numbered the same. So I would like to know your opinion on whether it's clear enough to follow along in the report, or if you guys would prefer a screen share.
I, for one, can follow in the report and don't want the screen share because that way I can better see faces, but that's 1 out of 7.
Can you tell us what you're about to go through?
Yeah.
Yes, so these are ideas. I think there are 27 numbered ideas. What I'd like to do first is talk a little bit about each, and then we'll loop back to the first one. They're in no particular order. I would like council to identify the factors for, that I can write them in the list for draft number 2, the factors against, and council's interest. So I'm looking for a low, medium, high. Like low, I'm not. Council's not interested, medium, or council is very interested.
Well, what are we looking at?
Page 141 and
what document do we
142.
go find?
Sorry?
I'm not seeing, I don't know what document we should go
Neither
to.
do I.
Page
So I can
140, page 141 and 142 of your agenda. If you have the 154-page agenda.
And I don't have that. What attachment is it to our?
What attachment?
It's the report itself.
I'm going to share my screen. It is the report, and it has 2022 budget idea. It's the actual report.
First attachment, correct?
First item, yes.
Thank you.
If you have any questions while I'm naming them, if it's not clear just by the name, you can stop and ask questions. The first go around is just to name them to give an idea of what the idea actually is. So first one, Honey Harbor Park Landing Building. This is where Remax is currently located, sever and dispose. The second item, Georgian Bay Public Library, reduce the number of operating sites from 3 to 2. The third item, Reset House, sever and dispose. Item 4, Baxter Ward Community Center, rent to third party. Item 5, Baxter Ward Community Center, demolish building. Item 6, MacTier Arena, shorten the ice season by 2 months. MacTier Arena, dispose. Item 8, reduce daily boat launch inspection and cleanup to weekly. So currently it's being done daily. The names of the launches are there in the same item to lump the cost to actually see a savings. So if you just remove one task, that employee is going to do something. But if you remove a group of tasks, we could probably not have the student, the employee, and the employee we're talking about here, so nobody gets offended. We're actually talking about eliminating summer students for parks and rec and operations. So it's not affecting any union or non-union employee. And this is reduce daily washroom cleaning to weekly and discontinuing the watering of the flower baskets, potentially hardscaping the flower baskets or removing them entirely. Item 9, sell at fair market value, Arthur Island Beach, Regatta Beach. Item 10, stop cutting the lawn at Baxter Ward Community Center. That takes about 1 day per week. Arbor Park, in front of CSB Community Services Building, the Gibson Lake Boat Launch and Ball Field, and GenMac. Item 11, put paid parking at, and the 4 parking lots are named: Honey Harbor Park, Blue Water Road, Miners Bay, 6 Mile Lake, and Wauwatosa. Item 12, sell the Honey Harbor School that we just purchased from Trillium School Board. Item 13, MacTier Cemetery, get a third-party manager. Item 14, Port Severn Park, close down the splash pad. Item 15, reduce the number of counselors to 5 for 2026. Item 16, CSB Community Service Building, lease it. Item 17, winter controls, reduce the level of service to minimum standards. Item 18, this was already done. The ones in yellows were already removed out of budget, but remove OP and ZBA reserves. Item 19, reduce the number of new bylaws or revisited bylaws. Examples, dark sky noise, short-term rentals. Item 20, stop enforcing district parking bylaws. Item 21, remove flexibility or contingencies within budgets. Item 22, remove annual CIP initiatives and operational grant reserve. This was already done. Item 23, remove annual staff events. This was already done. Item 24, removal of council meals for meeting, bring your own lunch. This was already done. Item 25, discontinue grants for community recreational programming. Item 26, remove council initiatives. This was already done. And item 27, pay off debt with investments. There any items that we want to talk about, or are we looping back to one and talking about each of them individually?
Councillor Cooper, followed by Councillor Wienko.
So just I understand what we're doing here. We have another list of all sorts of association costs, et cetera, we talked about earlier. So this is not related to that because I don't see any of that in here. So at 10,000 feet, if could you tell me how much we are apportioning to this? And I guess I can go down to the bottom versus the other document that we had, which was the cost of various programs that we have with a variety of associations and so forth. So just to give me a, we're looking at, we need to know what we're looking for, which has been suggested at 300 and some odd thousand, but we're not maybe putting enough in reserves. Is that correct?
Yep. So,
So maybe we need $500,000 or something like that, just as for argument's sake. And then is it reasonable to suggest that we could find maybe, 250,000 in each area, or I need the total number, I guess, for each area, so that if this one's 716, if I've got that correct. So if we found 250,000 there, we'd be down just under $500,000 on that group. The other one, I don't recall the number, I'm afraid. I know Mayor Kutzier remembers all the numbers, so whatever that is that a reasonable sort of starting point, I guess is what I'm asking.
so through your worship, the number we're looking for to balance the budget is $333,000. And you're absolutely correct with your assumption that for capital reserves, we're way far from the number, and anything extra would help. And it's the sum of, I can't say 250 from this pool and X amount from that pool. It's the sum of. So I think you guys have are already identified that in the granting pool, there are already some amounts that council wishes to add on. So therefore, if you add on to the first one, we need more out of this one.
Oh, thank you for that. And let's go through it line by line or whatever and figure it out. Thanks.
Councilor Yanko.
Well, getting back to my original suggestion, why don't we just talk about the school, $1 million. It's something that public really doesn't know that much about. We had no real plans for it. I don't think anybody's going to miss it. Get rid of that, and then we actually have money to play with, and then we can all go home early. So why don't we make a decision on that one first, and go from there.
Councilor Cooper.
I think until we've sorted out the solid waste issue, we maybe need to keep that property in reserve. We'd be really be very unfortunate if all our marinas get shut down, as has been suggested. And we have nowhere to put our garbage. And one of the suggestions has been that the school could be raised, and it could be created, we could create a bin site, a supervised bin site at that location. So I think we'd be losing an opportunity if we were to sell that immediately. That's just my comment. Thank you.
Councilor Bocheck, followed by Councilor Jarvis.
Well, I know more about fishing and hunting than I do about accounting, so I'll take a swing at this. My understanding that we have had a reassessment from MPAC since 2016. Is that correct?
Yes.
So knowing that the real estate values here have gone up tremendously and the assessments are going to be going up tremendously, if there was, say, a 20% increase in assessments, what would that equate to in the way of dollars? And my reason for asking that is because if we do push things to 2023, and we know that there is an impact assessment being done in 2023, and then maybe the funds are going to be there. I think the reason we're in a big shortfall here is because we haven't been able to capitalize on those funds, which should have been in place long before now. So I'm not too concerned about next year or getting elected based on this budget next year. But I think that has to be a consideration, that if we've got a huge increase coming due to assessments, we need to I guess, budget for that.
We won't get a huge increase due to assessments going up, because it just means you'll be paying less per dollar of value. In other words, we have a total budget and it gets divided out by the total assessment to come up with the mill rate. So if everybody's value doubled, they'd still be paying the same taxes, not double. You're not following me.
No, but we'll have that conversation on the side.
Okay. Councillor Jarvis, followed by Councillor Rankle, followed by Councillor Hazelton. Councillor Jarvis? Yeah, but you're muted. All that you've said is for naught.
All I have said is for naught. Julie, the budget ideas list totals out at $716,000. Does that include a deduction for the removal of the OPCBA, the removal of the CIP initiatives, yada yada, all the yellow stuff? Or okay, so 716 is net of those items being removed.
Yes, I can give you the total with the yellow items removed. 1 second. Because they already are removed, you're right. $529.
I was gonna say 530. Okay, so my math's pretty good. Okay, just food for thought. I'm gonna go back up to the top of the whole thing. You indicate that we are proposing to pull $324,000 from reserves, correct? One of the ideas. That's an idea or a highlight. I'm not sure how that's fitting in that regard. Is that something?
Pardon, can you repeat the question?
Back at the very top of this attachment, under report highlights, you indicate the operating budget includes the $324,000 pulled from reserves.
Correct. That is not on this list. I'm proposing that we pull it from reserve regardless of what we choose, because these are COVID safe restart funds that we received in 2021 that I anticipate we will not need to use. Therefore, we should budget to use them in 2022.
Okay, my question goes back a number of years. It seems to me we pulled from reserves when we did our budget last year. Is that correct?
Yes, in the sum of about $550,000.
Okay. Do you know, I know you haven't been around with us that long, neither have I. How long have we been pulling from reserves to balance our budget?
Looks like it started in 2019.
Ah, okay. Thank you. That helps me out a lot then. Okay. Oof. Okay. And going back to a few things that have already been mentioned, I'm with Councillor Cooper with regards to school and garbage. Otherwise, be one heck of an idea to put $1 million in our pocket. That's a pretty attractive proposition. And I'm having a hard time with the rest of it.
Well, what I'm going to do after a couple of comments, I'm going to just crudely go down and beside each item, you get to say yes, maybe, no. And that way it'll sort of narrow down discussions going forward. So, there's a fair chance that many of them will end up with a maybe beside them, but if we can put a yes or no beside some of them, that'll allow staff to further explore. But in the meantime, I believe Councillor Rienko and Councillor Hazelton had their hands up. But that's where I'm headed in short order, is a quick informal survey of, okay, what are we going to where do you have an appetite, if any? So I think Councillor Wanko followed by Councillor Hazelton, please.
Okay, I don't want to beat a horse to death, but this property at the school, it's not Township's job to find a waste disposal site for the garbage of Honey Harbor. It's the district's responsibility to find a site. And I don't think our public will understand that we're paying $1 million for a garbage dump. So I think you got to be very careful there. It's not our job to find a site. It's a district job. And they can find sites around the Honey Harbor. So let's not go there with, just keep it for garbage.
Well, in other words,
understand.
In other words, they could be our buyer.
They could be our buyer. Yes, they could be our buyer, but I don't think any constituents would understand you spending $1 million for a bin site.
Another way to look at it, though, is that we would have to pay the district for any of these acquisitions. I'm really perplexed at what's being suggested.
No, you don't pay the district to buy land for us. No. That comes out of their budget. They buy the land out of their budget. That's the way it works.
They're going to spend $1
All the
million?
costs, if they wanted to buy, if that was the option they wanted, they'd have to pay us $1 million, but they have other locations that they can go to. But they're the ones that buy the property and they maintain it. Garbage is not a township issue.
Okay. Councillor Hazelton, did you want to add something before we get to the survey?
Yeah, I think doing the survey has value so that we can kind of understand the factors for and against each item. I'd like to throw out another possibly controversial statement on the Honey Harbor School concept. If it's there and we own it, then maybe it becomes an option, and I think the option stinks. And I would prefer to not have it even available as an option and have somebody else buy it, which would, in my mind, force the district to consider other options such as marina-based bin sites, privately operated or whatever, in which case we don't end up with what I think is a terrible outcome. So I actually like the idea of liquidating the Honey Harbor School and solving our problem short term, and then doing a better job going forward about planning for these future costs, and perhaps even liquidating some other assets. But anyways, that's what we're going to discuss. So I'll leave it back to you. Thank you.
Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. Yeah, as far as the school goes, I agree that I do think that that's something we should look at, as liquidating it. I mean, I understand what Councillor Cooper's coming up with here, but I actually would think that the town would not be happy having bins in the middle of the town. And secondly, I agree with Councillor Hazelton on this. I think we should be fighting for bins at the marinas in some respect or another to make it convenient for the people that are driving in off the water.
But
So
we're
I would-
not. But tonight,
We're not.
I don't want us to spend more time talking about the solid waste challenges. And CEO Gunby wants to say something. I can just tell.
Thank you. I want to say the exact same thing you did. So to my favorite phrase, to reiterate, but I don't want to repeat myself. Can we just start going through the list, please, so Julie can get an idea of what you would like to see come forward?
Item 1, the Park Landing building that houses Remax upstairs and where the library was downstairs. That is a township asset. In the future, do you think it should be a township asset? Yes, no, maybe. All those who want to say yes, nod their head. We should keep it. All those who think we should get rid of it, nod their head. I think I'm seeing enough heads nod. So we think this is a definite consideration for disposal. Let staff explore that. Number 2, reduce the number of libraries from 3 to 2. So 1 library out of the 3 of them is gone. I don't know who wants to make that political decision as to which one's gone. So Councillor Wienko is going to jump in.
Let's go back to the Honey Harbor Park building. If you're going to sell it, isn't there some money involved? We
Yes.
probably get a couple $100,000 for it. Where's that value?
It's not listed here.
Okay, but we could probably get 300,000 for it, which would
Yep.
$500,000.
would balance our budget.
Yeah.
So
$500,000 right there.
what do we? This 15,000 doesn't mean anything to me, but 300,000.
See, what we're
from that
doing,
building-
what we are
I know.
doing now is we're taking this list of 27 items and we're reduce it down to maybe a handful, and then staff will come back with some rough numbers for us of what those handful will mean in the next round. I mean, it's going to save us $15,000 a year in capital costs, and I presume that's repair, upkeep and repair or something like that. And but they haven't estimated what we'd get for it in this chart, but we would like them to do that for next round.
We also don't have a tracking in here of the revenues that we get
No.
from the renting of that building. So it's we're really making comments here with missing significant information.
Well, but Councillor Hazelton, that's the whole idea. They've thrown some random ideas. Well, I won't say random. They've carefully come up with a bunch of ideas and wanted to see whether we had any appetite for any of them. Ms. Boutia.
On that question, the operating savings is nil because the revenue currently cover the costs.
Thank you.
Okay, so number one's a go. Library, I saw a lot of heads shaking their heads. I don't think there's much appetite for getting rid of a library. Number three, Brissette House. Sever and dispose.
There's no asset figure here. So once again, we're taking a stab in the dark, but
Yeah, well, we're not valuing this for number. I think we're just now looking at do we have any appetite to explore the possibility?
so if it's $200,000 or $300,000, why not?
I think it fits the category of a historical building in the township, and I think we would get a lot of flack if we tried to dispose of a historical asset.
I'm agreeing.
I think
What
there's an
about-
agreement with the Historical Society that it was donated to the township and the township was going to take care of it. So that's a no-brainer for me. I'm not looking at getting rid of that.
Yeah.
Dispose could also mean donate. It could be donated to an organization.
Yeah, the Historical Society, and then we'd have to support them with whatever it costs per year truck. Same time.
Okay, so one stays on the list, two's gone, three stays, is you're not going to do. There's not an appetite for getting rid of three at this point, unless you come up with a more rationale. Baxter Community Center, rent to a third party. I mean, and we got right below it, get rid of that building. So do we want to rent it out to the third party, or do we want to get rid of it and get rid of all that cost and that facility that serves MacTier?
Don't we already rent it out?
It serves MacTier?
It's the Baxter Ward. It's in Port Severn.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was in the wrong spot. I apologize. It serves Port Severn, Oak Bay area.
But isn't it, don't we already rent it out to certain parties?
Not on a full-time basis. This would be to someone who would want to use it strictly for their use, and they can take care of the maintenance and things like that, instead of just the one-offs that when we do open up to the public, we would rent out.
In other words, it would be for private purposes and the public will no longer be using the building.
It is a true community center. There was a lot of personal and public funds that were put into that community center.
Okay.
It's a real hub for our community here in Port Severn, so I wouldn't entertain doing anything.
Okay, so I don't think we want to get rid of that one. Let's go down to the MacTier arena. I was a step ahead of myself. I apologize. We could either shorten the ice season, or they're throwing out the possibility of disposing of it.
I'm just gonna
Yeah,
speak
I
up
mean,
on this one.
that's-
Same thing. It's the hub of MacTier and it's used by the community. I say no, personally.
Okay, now, let's roll on. Let's roll on down to number 8. And number 8 is weekly cleaning versus daily cleaning of all the boat ramps and the washrooms.
I'd say
Yeah,
weekly.
I wouldn't want to use one of those washrooms at the end of the week.
Yeah.
Weekly in the boat ramp and daily, keep daily in the washrooms.
Yeah, I think you have to keep the hygiene.
Yeah, I'm curious as to what cleaning they're doing daily at a boat ramp. Ms. Boutia.
They're actually going to pick up the garbages. Director Sokesh can discuss more about it. But the reason we bulk them together is if you keep doing one daily and the other one not daily, you won't be saving any costs.
If you're cleaning the washer, you might as well take the garbage with you. Is that what it is, Mr. Sokash?
That is it in general. There is quite a bit of garbage collected every day at the launches, unfortunately.
The launches are used.
Speaking specifically about the Honey Harbor boat launch, I can't imagine how we have anybody going there or that who would need to go there. Rick's Marina is right beside it, and he tends to look after it anyways. And there are no washrooms there. So do we need to break up this discussion into the individual locations there? Because perhaps some of the other boat launches have similar characteristics, or perhaps, for example, you could contract out the cleaning at Miners Bay or Gibson Lake or 12 Mile, whatever. I mean, what are the other options that we have as opposed to sending people out there?
Ms. Boutia.
For your worship, again, if we break this up into smaller pieces, there might not be a savings. So for example, if we're already going to the Port of Honey Harbor to clean daily, the little loop it takes to get to the Honey Harbor boat launch and clean up a few things, the savings won't be there if we don't do it as a bulk package.
Well, I think we've already said that we hate to have our washrooms cleaned only weekly, and therefore I think there's a consequence. We're not considering this savings.
I just can't see somebody driving from Honey Harbor all the way up to Stewart Lake every day to the landings. Why can't you do it twice a week and do that? And the washrooms in Honey Harbor and Port 7, they can be done by the staff in the south, and the washrooms up at the Stewart Lake can be done by the staff to the north every day. So try to reduce the amount of traveling. Instead of going out 5 days a week to these places, go twice a week. You save almost half the amount of money.
Sorry, there shouldn't be anything on Miners Bay anyways, because I don't think we don't have a washroom or garbage. We've got the bins up there. Well, anyways, that's just mine. But
I think it's got to be left at the landing.
At the Port 7 Park and launch ramp, we do have washrooms. We have garbage cans. That one has got to be done daily. If not, you're going to be called daily to go over and clean up the mess.
yeah.
So you might as well just keep doing it daily than be over there daily and not budgeting for it.
Okay, Mr. Sokash, do you want anything before we move on? Because we've already said we're not cutting this.
Nope, that's fine.
Okay, next one. I'm trying to move this along, and pretty soon I think the clerk's going to come in and say we have to pass a motion saying we're going past 4:30. But the next one is sell Arthur Island Beach. Councilor Cooper.
I think that would be pretty ill-advised. It's the place for the recreation program, the largest recreation program on the east coast of Georgian Bay. We have lots of facilities for our young folk up and down the township, and I would think this would be a big mistake. So I would not support that at all.
And I think I saw Councillor Bochek nodding his head in agreement with you. Okay. Anybody else have an appetite for this, or should we just move on? Move on. Don't have an appetite here. Stop cutting lawns.
Did you miss Regatta Beach?
Was that a separate one, Regatta
No,
Beach?
Arthur Island is Regatta Beach, I believe.
So Julie, could you correct that? Regatta Beach is usually referred to as Go Home Lakes Regatta Beach, township
Correct.
property.
Oh,
And I would say, don't consider that, but
Yeah.
No, no.
okay. But so you might want to just add to your descriptor as Regatta Beach, Go Home Lake.
There's probably more than one Regatta Beach is what you're saying.
Yeah, there's, I'm sure, but yeah.
Okay. Stop cutting lawns.
No,
We had that
You can't have
problem.
a ball diamond. You can't have a ball diamond and not cut the grass.
yeah, no.
And we had this problem before when we went wild in some areas and we got more complaints than one would want to have. So I'm not sure we'll get away with this one. Paid parking at a number of sites.
Yes, I think so. Personally, yes.
Ms. Boutia.
Just to clarify, this would not be an instant revenue maker. The investment would probably be around a 10-year return on investment if we put in the proper self-serve, and also with increased bylaw enforcement. We would probably start seeing a return once the capital investment is paid off.
It's a good long-term strategy.
it is, but in the short term, it could cost us a lot. I mean, as you said, the bylaw enforcement, you have people deciding they want to park elsewhere, which could be a real problem. Again, when it comes to bylaw enforcement and roads, we'd have to be we'd be looking at a significant upfront investment in order to get the long-term payback.
Could increase parking
And
ticket revenues.
Some of these places are pretty remote, and I don't know how those machines will hold up in remote areas. I can see the Port 7 Park. It's pretty visible from all the various roads. But you get up into Miners Bay and 6 Mile Lake and so on, I think you're going to have a lot of damage done to those machines.
Yeah,
You put up,
is what a baseball bat can do.
well, you have to put up cameras, I think, because these are pretty remote areas.
Okay, so we'll leave that one at a maybe.
Yeah.
Number 12 is sell the honey. Oh, here we go for the school. The Honey Harbor School, and I've heard a couple of comments about let's get rid of it, and a couple of comments of let's hang on to it for a bit.
Well,
Can it
if
be
we,
subdivided into a couple of lots and maybe sell off half of it? And then keep one for maybe a bin site and sell the other half, you know, because it is a big lot. Is there a way we can subdivide it?
Ms. Dunby.
Thank you, Chair. That is definitely something that if committee wants, we can bring back that option with the zoning and what would be required to sever it off.
I go for maybe on that, definitely.
I think if we sell the Remax building, I don't think we need to sell the school, right?
I agree.
You're gonna have it. I don't know what the value of it is, but there'll be enough to get us out of the crisis. Just that one sale.
Why don't we leave it as a maybe?
Okay.
Mhm.
I could just add, unless somebody can talk I'm sure Councillor Wianco could talk the district into buying it for $1 million, and then we'd be in the money.
We get a raise.
So I don't think I have to say this, but I clearly do because I'm going to say it. There's no guarantee we're going to get $1 million for anything. So I wouldn't be resting your hat on this $1 million amount.
We have to have a plan for that site.
Yeah, I was being a bit facetious. Anyway, I think it's a maybe. Thank you.
Mactier Cemetery. Third-party management. I'm not sure how much that's actually going to save us.
Yeah.
Me
Mr.
neither.
Okay,
Mr. Sokash, is there any point in really looking at that? I don't know what the cost really is to. Okay, well, then, I don't.
I think a lot of people have already died looking after that. So
But do we get revenue from this? We get an annual revenue from this cemetery?
The
Like,
fees
why would
are
somebody want to take it
regulated.
over?
Yeah, the fees for plots and things like that are regulated, so we can't increase the fees. So we're not really making a lot of money off of it, but it's just something, it's one of the crazy things we have on the list for you to look at.
But who would want to assume responsibility for it? Like, what's
There
in
are
it for
companies
them?
who do it.
Oh, okay.
Crazy company. They do it.
okay. So what, do you want that at a maybe? Is that what you're saying to us? I mean, it's not gonna make that much difference in our budget, I don't think.
Why don't we just forget it?
And if staff wants to get rid of it, then they will come to us with a proposal. I'm sure they will. Part 7 Park, close down the splash pad.
No, that's very popular.
Okay. We're not doing that. Reduce number of counselors to 5 for 2006. It would certainly make budget meetings go faster.
For 2000.
I would support it. I would support it for next term.
I don't know if we can do it that quickly.
I'll volunteer.
It does state for 2026, which I believe we'd have to start the process now to get there for next election.
Okay.
I think
Any
it's a maybe.
appetite in having staff explore that as to what's required? I mean,
I think we also need to do some sort of work like we did with the ward boundary review, and I'm not convinced it's going to save all that much money, and it might be ill-advised. I don't know. That's just my view.
and it is partially coupled with the district and whether or not they allow us to continue with 3 counselors in the future, because you just don't know where they're going to go with that never-ending project of towns versus townships. And no, I won't make any further comment. Okay.
Was that a no or a maybe?
Leave it as a maybe. What the heck? Gotta have 1 or 2 maybes in here. Community services building, lease it. How much space in there are we using, and where would that go now? That'd be my question.
Again, it's one of those, I don't know if I should say it or not. It wasn't the best planned or designed building. So the middle is just wide open and there's about 8 washrooms in there and maybe 6 offices. And then the library has the entire middle of it.
Yeah. Councilor Hazelton.
So originally, my understanding was that we chose to occupy it so we could accommodate staff that needed to be accommodated. If and I understand the library's in there now, if we don't have it, then do we have a staff office accommodation problem?
I don't think we would, just based on the fact that council recently approved a sort of hybrid coming into the office / working from home. For instance, there's 3 employees that work out of Julie's office. They're not all 3 there at the same time, but it's accommodating. So if it did come down to it, we would be able to find room.
Okay, so if the township operations could do without it, then the next question is, what do we do with the library? Because the library is seeking to grow and become more relevant. And we're quite pleased at being able to move back into the bigger room from the tiny room. So I'm wondering if we chose to lease it, then they wouldn't be there, and where would they go?
There's
What
many
about,
options.
what
There's
about the
many-
Baxter Community Center?
No.
There are options to look into. So if this even remains as a maybe, we can bring back some examples.
And what
Let's leave it.
so what opportunity, so we talked earlier about the Brissette House and options there, and there were discussions at one point in time about somehow repurposing the Brissette House as a Port Severn library location. I think that those two ideas are linked and maybe should be considered.
Okay, so let's put a maybe on this one. And let's vote to continue our meeting past 4:30. Ms. Way, it is now 4:27, so I think we're getting to that point. Ms. Way? Okay. All those in favor of continuing this meeting past 4:30, but ending before 6? Okay, that has passed. Ms. Way, please put the right words to it. Thank you. See, sometimes if we don't follow procedure perfectly, we can still get away with it. I like it. Now we're talking about winter control, reduce service levels to minimum standards on our roads. Scares the heck out of me. Okay, no, we don't. We want to keep winter roads as safe as possible under the circumstances.
Agreed,
Our insurance-
100%.
Our insurance is high enough.
Now we have remove, okay, we've already done that, so we don't have to talk about that. Number 19, reduce
That
the,
council wants to reinstate it.
I mean, this is reserves for extra expenses if we decide to make some changes to the official, what is this for then?
This is because in 2023, we are hoping to implement an official plan review, which is supposed to be done every 10 years. And we're a little behind on that. And then after the official plan review comes a zoning bylaw review.
Okay,
So because they're very pricey, we were suggesting putting money aside every year to make sure that when the time came, we wouldn't have to come and ask you for $350,000.
okay. That's a 6 of one, half dozen of another, sort of. Leave it as maybe then, if that makes you better. Reduce the number of new bylaws or revisit bylaws, example, dark sky noise, short term, limited resources for research and enforcement. But then basically you're saying we don't want to listen to what council has to say. I don't like that.
We worked hard to get those bylaws into place, and it was at the request of our residents. I do not want to entertain reducing the bylaws.
Okay. I saw enough head shaking. Stop enforcing district parking bylaws. Can somebody explain this? We're doing the district job for them?
If Tony was here, he could answer that for you. But we do, they have their own set rates for parking tickets and fines, which are very, very low. I think it is, $10, $15 or something ridiculous. So it's almost not even worth our time.
So we waste our time to give them a little bit of money and let the district do their own work or pay us to do it. If they paid us to do it, it wouldn't be an issue. Remove flexibility contingencies within budget. No, I mean, we got to have a little bit of cushion, and we're only talking 50 here. That's what I'm interpreting the head shakes. 22 is removal of annual CIP initiative and operational grant reserve. So this, how is the 60,000 going to be spent?
Through your worship, so last year, council approved that we put money aside to fund CIP. CIP is a community improvement plan. And that has been removed this year. And in conjunction with that, we were proposing to put some money aside into reserves for operational grants as they come forward, so that we wouldn't have to dip into working fund reserves should council want to pursue that grant opportunity.
Well, so in a sense, what you're doing here is saying, well, let's put an extra 60,000 into working reserves, because you don't want to dip into them if something comes along. I mean, it's almost 6 of one, half dozen the other, isn't it?
In my view, the operational grant reserve is for a different purpose than a working fund reserve. However, yes, short answer.
Ms.
They're both
Gunby.
on the same side of the balance sheet, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Ms. Gunby, were you there to say something?
No, I had to turn my camera off to blow my nose.
Thank you for the entertainment.
Mayor Coutier,
Yes.
this actually is something that I must have missed the conversation on, but we are still planning on doing a CIP. So I'm surprised by this item. I must have just missed the conversation, but I would like to keep this in the budget, as we do have a lot of businesses that are struggling with renovations, etc., especially in communities where downtown cores are struggling because of fire or turnaround. This was very successful a couple of years ago when we did digital Main Street and Main Street revitalization. So I'd vote to keep this in.
But because I hadn't heard too much about it this past year, I didn't know the program still existed.
It's a municipal program that is legislated, so there's a lot of process that we have to go through. We have it slated to start this fall, and then this little honeybee thing came in, but we still intend to do it in the future.
Okay. So we better put that back onto at least the maybe list, if not the yes list. Or how, I don't know which one's yes and which ones are no here, but anyway. So let's put that on maybe, so that we don't forget about it, because I think supporting our local businesses is something that we have to consider. Removal of annual staff events. I'm not sure I really like you doing that, because I think the staff, if we're allowed to have events in the future, are worthy of some recognition. And we're not talking big dollars here at all.
Are we talking Christmas parties and things like that?
I mean, $2,000, come on, folks, that's nothing.
Through you, your worship, my opinion is that most of the things we do are potlucks, and in my opinion, should I want to give little gifts to my staff for their contribution to the team, I am in a position to do so without requiring township funds, my opinion.
Ms. Gunby?
I'm 50-50. I completely see Julie's side, but I do know that staff do appreciate the Christmas party and knowing that the township puts money towards it, and we get the $50 gift cards at Christmas time with personalized cards. And so I'm not sure that staff would appreciate these being taken away either. Sorry, Julie.
I say we leave it in.
Leave it in.
Okay, well, I'm leaving it in. All right. Next 2,000, they don't want to feed us anymore. Not that we've missed it the last 18 months.
Leave it out.
Okay, it's out.
Leave it out.
Leave it out, it's out. Okay.
I'm gonna miss the fillet.
Maybe we'll each have to put our own dollars in.
We'll go across the road.
Maybe we'll have a conversation about counselors being responsible for providing lunch on a rotation basis.
Well, that could be unhealthy sometimes.
I'll be ordering from Pizzaville.
How about
Okay.
We have that
Take her off.
responsibility in the library board, but we can't meet, so too bad, so sad.
Discontinue grant for community recreational programming. That's from the list that we were sort of looking at before.
Right, that's the whole conversation that you guys had earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I finished with saying anybody who applies for it, give them a maximum of $1,500 and cap it. I think we've been
Okay.
extending ourselves way too far on that one.
So we want to continue that program in one form or another. Let's say that.
It's not a maximum of $1,500, a maximum of $1,000.
Yeah, it's $1,000 and 500 if you have a regatta. It's very straightforward.
That's the
And
way
it'd be
it works.
fine. I'd say leave it in.
Remove council initiatives. That was just a catch-all for if we came up with some crazy idea during the year. Well, if we come up with a crazy idea during the year, we'll ask for a change to the budget at that time.
How much of that was spent on lawyers?
None of it.
Well, how,
Ms. Boutier, you wanted to make a comment?
The issue is that you're constantly drawing from working fund reserve and not replenishing the working fund reserve. And if you add it later in the year, we're not taxing for it.
So leave it in, leave it in.
Okay, maybe we'll leave it in, because you're going to come up with another draft before we finalize our budget anyway. And finally, pay off debt with investments.
Could I make a comment, please?
Please.
For that 50,000? I'd like I'm going to come back in November with a request for 50% of the feasibility study. And that might be where that might fit. This is for the education center. So that would be around $8,500. So
You'd like to leave it in other words?
I would, thank you.
Okay, I have heard that from a few others, so let's leave it in for now. And pay off debts with investments. Ms. Boutier.
So prior to 2020, our investments generated more than the cost of interest. Since COVID and 2020 and this year, our investments are not even covering the cost of our interest payments on our loans. Therefore, we could pull our investments and which are our reserves. So it's the cash monies equivalent to our reserve, not quite equivalent, but it and pay off debt to save interest.
So that begs the question, if we then had to come up with some money for something, we would be borrowing from the bank?
Correct. Possibly correct.
Going back into debt, so to speak.
Yeah, but on the other hand, Mr. Mayor, are we not paying more in interest payments on our debt than we are actually getting in interest on our investments?
That is the current situation for 2020 and 2021. It wasn't prior to. So in 2019 and before, we were generating more income than the interest payments. So that's just a recent flip. What the market's going to do in the future, if I had a crystal ball, I would tell you, but I can't.
Well, which then begs the question, the nature of our investments, and I'm sure you've told us this to us before, but I don't remember.
Correct. So we're very tightly legislated with the Municipal Act on what we can invest in. It can't be anything risky, and most of it is investments in municipally related ventures.
Interest bearing in most cases?
Yes, it's mostly interest bearing. There's very little other capital gains or dividends on any of the investments.
So we haven't enjoyed the ride in the market of the past year, for instance. Yeah.
Time to deem some land surplus.
But then you have to find a buyer for it.
And it's a boom market right now. Unlike the investment market, the real estate market's booming.
Yeah, maybe we have to relist the surplus that we have that hasn't been bought. All right, we have gone through this list. I don't think I've got a firm answer one way or another on 27, so we'll call it a maybe. We've gone through the list. We've listened to all of this. I don't know if you want to dare go back to that page and a half. You do. You have more nerve than I do. Councilor Bianco.
Well, if we're planning on getting a price on the Honey Harbor landing building, and we plan to potentially sell that, then that changes the whole perspective of what we're going to do about all those grants and so on. So if you make a decision today to sell some assets, I like to wait till next month to argue out the smaller stuff, because maybe we can afford all the smaller stuff.
But maybe we don't need all the smaller stuff, so we need to think about that too.
But then we can argue that later. But the point is, if we can get down below the 300,000, then we have the luxury of doing things.
I think if we got an appraisal on that Honey Harbor Landing building, we'd all be very surprised.
Positively or negatively?
Positively. I think you have a waterfront, you have acreage, you have a building, commercial zoning. I'll be one of the first people, to support the sale of that. And I think we'd have many buyers interested in it.
Okay. So maybe we shouldn't revisit that list right now. Can I make a suggestion to everyone? Ms. Boutiette, send out that list in some sort of modified form to each counselor. Ask them to tick off some boxes and send it back to you confidentially. And then report to us, between the 7 of us, if all 7 respond, what you came up with. That might save a lot of going back and forth conversation.
This doesn't constitute a meeting of any sort, Jessica? Because we're forwarding the business of council outside of council's chambers.
I'm sorry, I was reading an email.
I was suggesting to Ms. Boutiette that she just survey all the counselors on their attitude or opinion on all those items on that page and a half list of grants.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's outside council business, because she did that a couple of months ago with all of us on, what are our interests in budget. We're not making any decisions. We're just expressing an opinion to her.
Right, I agree.
Okay, so based on the conversation we had yesterday, if you can send all of that information to me separately, that would be fantastic.
So as long as Julie
got that step, but my first step was to have Ms. Boutiette prepare the survey.
And then she can send it to you, and you can send it to us, or whatever you like.
Exactly. We'll figure it out.
Yeah. All right. Who has energy for more talk on budget right now? That's what I thought. So, be it resolved, moved by Councillor Hazelton, seconded by Councillor Bocek, be it resolved that Committee of the Whole received the 2022 operating capital budget draft number 1, and the Committee of the Whole directs staff to bring forward a draft number 2 at the November Committee of the Whole with the items identified as of interest. So I think we've done that for that one list. We've also given lots of feedback on other items. And Ms. Boutiette, I'm afraid she and her department have more homework to do. Though she knew she would. Sorry, that wasn't in part of the resolution. All those in favor? Thank you.
I'd like to thank Julie for a great presentation. It was very productive.
I would agree. I think Ms. Boutiette's doing a very good job for us of bringing these things forward and getting us to talk about them. And we'll see where we land over the next month or two.
I probably understood 20% of this, which is 10% more than I've ever understood of this.
There you go. It's a good day when you learn something. It keeps you young.
I'm with you, Brian.
Yeah.
You only take
Oh.
another 10 years to catch up.
Yeah.
That means he's got to run for election a few more times.
Oh, God.
Oh, God.
Is there any new business that anybody would like to bring up for this particular committee of the whole meeting? Moved by Councillor Douglas, seconded by Councillor Jarvis. Be it resolved that the committee of the whole does now adjourn at 4:47 PM to reconvene on Tuesday, November 9th, 2021, or at the call of the chair. There was no time listed there, but we'll figure it out between now and then. Councillor Bocek?
I'm just gonna let everyone know that there's a chance I won't be at the November's meetings. It'll be the first time in 7 years, but I'm gonna be out of the country and not sure that I'll have access to the internet. So I'll do my best, but probably won't see you next month.
Dare we say bon voyage?
Yeah, well,
Does that include golfing, Brian?
little bit of Arizona time.
Ah.
Okay. All those in favor? According to my clock, it's still 4:47. And live streaming can stop. Thank you very much, everybody.